adequate notice of this meeting was sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Co-Star, our official newspapers, on December 2nd, 2020, and notice of this meeting was posted on the bulletin board of the municipal building.
Thank you, April. If everybody could stand and join me in saluting the flag of our great nation.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everybody just remain standing for a moment for our troops, their families, all our first responders. And I have to mention that Doug Geike, a former councilman here, has passed away since our last meeting. And Kenneth Entwistle, a longtime resident, owner of the Mayfair Hotel, passed away since our last meeting. Thank you. Okay, we have a couple things on the workshop tonight. First one, we're going to hear from the Environmental Commission. We want to make a presentation to the council. So, Ed, you come on up. Oh, we're going to be able to screen? Yeah. All right, we can go down, so we can take a look at it. There you go. Gotcha.
So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ed Lippincott. I'm the chair of the Belmar Environmental Commission. One of our newer members, Colleen Pallas Sullivan, put together a presentation regarding hydration stations for the Boardwalk. As some of you may know, when COVID hit, they removed showers and all the water fountains from the Boardwalk. Showers came back last year, but no water fountains. Apparently, Colleen's a big walker, a lot of the joggers on the Boardwalk, and myself looking for a drink of water from time to time, noticed the lack of water fountains. So she did some research, and she found some excellent products that are being used. Water bottle filling stations. We used to have something similar. They were similar to the showers, where you could fill your own water bottles. They were installed, but the Public Works found that they didn't work after a period of time, so they got rid of them. So now we're just back to simple water fountains. These are a little bit more involved. She recommended installing them at the two permanent buildings, 5th and 11th Avenue, as well as the non-permanent structures, the removable bathrooms on 3rd, 8th, 16th, and 19th. Like I said before, she is in contact with the runners, and a lot of people complaining that there was no water available to get a drink when you're running on the Boardwalk. Also, we felt it was a really excellent way to help reduce plastic pollution and the preponderance of bottle caps that are just littering the sand on the beach. So if we could encourage people to refill water bottles, bring them to the beach, it could be a real benefit there. These are what the units look like. The one in Asbury is different, but very similar design, but the ones you see in Spring Lake, Bradley Beach has 4 of them. Spring Lake has 1, but they're installing others at the same time. The ones in Bradley Beach, we reached out to the Bradley Beach Public Works. They're in love with these. They think they're great. They're easy to maintain. They hold up well in the weather. They're, well, you'll see in the later slides what the construction is like. Vandal-proof, very durable for the sea air, which I think was the problem with the old units that we had, was that the salt air just really got to them and they didn't work after a while. So this is what they'll look like. And like I said, the people from Bradley Beach Public Works were in love with them. They were all in, and they said if you had any questions about how to install them, how to maintain them, they can help you out with that. Like I said, stainless steel, all the The green areas you see there are powder coated, and then the exposed metal areas all stainless steel. One of our other members, Lou's here, right? Did I see Lou? Lou's back there. Lou knows about these things, and he said that's the 316 stainless steel is really durable and will hold up to the salt air and the corrosion along the beachfront. These are the costs. $4,000 per unit. That's if you buy at least 6 units. If you buy less than 6, the price goes up, but not significantly. So we could get anywhere from 6 to 8 units, would be $38,000 total. That includes shipping. And there was other vendors available for this. The Bradley Beach people said these guys were very, very competitive, and they were the best price that they saw available. A lot of the other stuff is just frequently asked questions, about how durable they are. Good choice. They're also cooled. They have coolers in them, so the water, when you fill your water bottle, when it comes out of the water fountain, it's actually cold. So that's a boost. I like a nice cold drink when I'm down there. What else? And then these are just the steps to winterize and flush them. The only thing that they did say was that if you installed them to a non-permanent structure, that they're very heavy and that they'd have to be supported somehow. That was it. And that was about it, really. I always feel like I talk too fast at these things because I don't want to take it this time. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, Tom.
So if there's a cooler, does that mean it needs electric?
Correct.
Too?
Yep.
So it needs water and electric?
Mm-hmm.
Do we already have power where you want to put these, or is that going to have to be
Yeah.
added? Yes?
All the portable bathrooms have power.
Okay, so it's no big deal to wire.
The other thing we spoke about too is, that, honestly, for the price, you could probably, if you wanted to spend the money, put some down by the marina, over by the tennis courts maybe, over where the Friends of Belmar Harbor. But that would have to, the first thing we checked out when we talked to Bradley Beach, we're like, how did you pay for it? And they're like, oh, we took it out of the beach utility fund. And I was like, oh, wind. But if you wanted to put them down by the marina, it's probably be a pretty good investment if you wanted to spend the money there. Yes?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it, and I can't read that. Did you say it's filtered water, or is it just tap water?
You know what, I don't think I know the answer to that question. Okay, there we go.
Is that filtered water?
Yep. Okay, if there's no more questions, that's it. Thank you for your time. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. One question. I work down on the beachfront in the summer.
Okay.
One problem we did find a couple of years ago when we had those filling stations, the water was always very warm.
Yeah,
These
So,
have coolers in them.
these are, if this water comes
these
out
are
cold.
okay. I didn't hear you. Okay, thank
Yep,
you.
very good. All right, that's it. That's it. Thanks for your time. I'll just leave it.
Thank you, Ed. The council will definitely consider it and take a look at it for next summer. I think it's a good idea. I know the ones at Bradley Beach, and they work pretty well. All right, our next, I think we're going to still stay there for the next presentation. We have the Mediterranean project developers here, and they have some changes to what we had first seen, so we'll let them show them to us and we'll take a look at them. Oh, all right. ready to go?
We are ready.
Thank you. Yes, we do. So we appreciate the governing body making time for us tonight. Very quick introduction. My name is Ed Russo. I'm a principal of Russo Development, which is the company that's proposing the project that our architect, Dean Marcano, is going to be presenting tonight. This is on the Pat's Motel, Route 35 train station property, just opposite the Marina Grill. This is our second presentation for the governing body. We did have a virtual meeting back in March when Dean had also presented our concept plans as they stood at the time. We since then have been continuing to refine the design of the project. We've made some revisions that we're going to talk through in detail this evening in response to comments that we received from the borough, members of the governing body, the borough's professionals, and also some of the comments that were made publicly by members of the community. At the end of Dean's presentation, I wanted to take a few minutes to not only address any questions or comments from the governing body, but we know that there's been concerns that have been raised recently by members of the public. We've presented a response to each one of the concerns that we're aware of that I would like to talk through, and we're happy to address any new comments or concerns that come out of tonight's presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dean, and we'll try to keep it brief tonight. We know there's other things on the agenda. 20 to 30 minutes for Dean's presentation, and then as much time as we were allowed for Q&A. Thank you. Sorry, I wanted to make one other comment. We brought hard copies of Dean's presentation. I think we have about 30 or so. We're happy to hand them out to anybody that would like to follow along with a hard version. So if you raise your hand, we'll start passing them out. Okay. Sorry, we only have a limited copy. We're going to try to make more copies if we can quickly.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of Belmar Council. My pleasure to be here tonight. I'm going to make a presentation on the project called the Mediterranean on Route 35 between 8th and 10th. My name is Dean Marchetto. I'm an architect and a planner. I am founding principal of my company, Marchetto, Higgins, Stevie, for 40 years. We have 40 employees, we have 40 architects, and we specialize in these multifamily mixed-use type of projects around the state. One project that we were the architect for, you may know because it's not too far from here, is Pier Village. This is a project we did about 20 years ago, and it's really been a big hit in Long Branch. And we think that this project, might exemplify the kind of action and intensity and interest that they did for Long Branch here for Belmar as well. So this is, we're going through, you see the, you see the, so, computer's moving on its own, but this is a retail residential mixed-use property with an outdoor space for Long Branch. It's faced towards the beach, and it has a little bit of a beachfront style architecture, which I think is very popular in Long Branch. So here is our site. You can see it's on Route 35. It's between 8th and 10th. It's about 3.2 acres, and it's about 640 feet long along 35. And the property is located adjacent to your town center plaza, and of course it faces the water as well. It's marked there in the red box. So it's marked in the red box where it says project location. So here's a view of the site from the back, looking towards the water. You can see the site. It's located just behind the water's edge, behind the marina. You see there's a neighboring building to the left, which is a 9-story residential building, and I believe there's a new 4-story building built towards the right. And you can see your town center mall, and then the place where the Christmas tree is. I think that the site will nicely manage to create a sense of space around that location, and I'll show you that in the presentation. I have a few plans, and then I have a 3D model, which I'll be able to fly around, and you'll be able to see the project from all different angles. Again, just a photograph of the site in the back, behind the main grill. We looked at some of the other buildings that surround the site, just to get a sense of the flavor of the architectural style for Belmar down here, and these are some of the buildings that we saw. Very nice looking buildings with a sort of like a stucco top and a brick base. This is one we thought was a particularly handsome project, and we like to look at the surrounding areas in town to sort of get a flavor for your town and design something that fits within the context of Belmar. Here's another one that seems to have a nice beachfront style architecture with some cupolas, some siding and some stone, and nice mix of materials, and some landscaping out in front. This one is on the town center. It has a retail component on the base, right on Main Street. Here's a project that we saw. This is, we didn't take any cues from this building, but this also surrounds the town center. It's a relatively new building. And then when we looked at some architectural styles that we thought might fit nicely here, we thought of this building. We saw this building, and it set up a precedent for us. It's kind of like a Mediterranean style. It has a stucco top, it has a masonry base, its materials are light and airy, and it has nice balconies and openings. So we thought that this would maybe influence our design thinking on the project. Here's another view of it. You see it has a base, a middle, and a top, and the building's broken up into components rather than feeling like a very long building. This is the overall site plan and the view of the project from up above. We have the project right next to the rail station on the lower left of the page, and so the project is very, very transit friendly. It's a transit oriented development, and the site, and we looked at the redevelopment plan. You're able to build within the limits of the redevelopment plan a 4-story building here that is a rectangle that fits up in the whole site. What we did, and this is the difference between the redevelopment plan as it's written and the proposal we're making, is we've taken the building and rather build a big rectangular lot that occupied the whole lot, which is 640 feet long. We divided the project into two smaller buildings and opened up the frontage on 35 to the water so that the open decks between the project had views of the water. And it also created 4 separate facades on Route 35, which made the building feel like 4 smaller buildings rather than one long block that went through. And you'll see that in the model. So this is our first sketch, actually. This was our first sketch of the project, and you can see here how the building is divided into 2 pieces, and then there's a center court in the middle with a driveway into the entrance. The center is lower, and that the building basically has several components. The 2 components on the left and the right that are in the middle are set way back, in the back of the C, and there's an open amenity deck on the top of the parking deck that faces outward, and that we'll see. And it, something happened. Okay, so here is the site plan for the ground floor. You can see the parking lot on the left, the parking lot on the right are based on the ground floor. You enter through the middle, and you can see how the building is broken up into 2 separate parts. The middle court that is probably aligned with 9th Street is where you enter into the garages and you enter into the 2 residential lobbies. There's a small retail component on the bottom left at the ground floor. The building is set back 25 feet from 10th, and the train station is right there at the lower left. You can see the parking that exists there. On the right side, we propose to make that parking there more of an open festival plaza or a park for events and festivals. You see the paving there on the lower right. Once you go in the garage on each side, there's a ramp that takes you down. So if you look up to the top right, you go in, if you're a resident, you pull right into the garage off the center, and you go down a ramp, and you come down into a completely underground parking area, which is very nice because when parking is hidden from view, you don't see the garage, it's below grade. And you come down the ramp, and this is residential parking. We have 278 parking spaces in the basement for residences. Going back up, on the left side, that's customer, retail, and public parking on the left. And we have, in total on this project, we have 477 parking spaces. We have a total of 224 residential units, which are 1- and 2-bedroom residential apartments. There are 357 parking spaces for the residents who will live here and 120 spaces for public use. And those 120 spaces are on the left side, and they come off right opposite the railroad. You see the sign that says residential lobby. Just to the left of that is the garage door, and you get into the parking deck for the public, which is on the ground floor. Moving up above the first floor, you can see here, this is sort of like a double C. You have a leg on 10th, and then a leg that comes out, and then a bridge across, and then the other piece of the building tapers down, and it's on the right side. And you'll see what we have. We have elevators on both sides, so depending on which side of the building you live on, you come from the garage up into the residential floor. On this floor, in the very leading edge of the second one from the right, is a blue area called the amenity space, and that's like a club, a gym, sort of like a community room for residents, and that opens up to an amenity deck that faces the water. Fourth floor, you can see here, above the amenity on the 4th floor, we have a restaurant. We have a public restaurant that's ended off that center courtyard, and that public restaurant will be a beautiful 2-3-story restaurant that focuses out to the water, and you'll see that in the model as well. But you can see the building breaks into 2 C shapes. rather than a big rectangle that occupies the whole block, we simply took those legs out that would be along 35 and put them on the top. So the redevelopment plan allows for a 4-story building that is that full block, and what we're proposing is to make it a 5-story building by taking those legs and removing them from 35 and putting them on top. So we have a 5-story building, 2 smaller 5-story buildings, rather than one full lot 4-story building. So now, what I have here is a 3D model, which I'll fly around for you. You can see where we are in this sketch. The left C and 10th Avenue is on the right, and the 8th Avenue 8th is on the right, and 10th is on the left, and you can see the center courtyard there. If I tilt it up, that's the elevation that faces the rail line, and you can see the relative height between the proposed building at 5 stories and the neighboring building. I came over the bridge tonight to get here from 35 over the Shark River, and as I entered into Belmar, on the left, I saw that existing building to the left, and I said, maybe there's a better way we can create a landmark entrance into Belmar. And I think that that is what I'm trying to do here. You can see there's a bunch of different cupolas on the top and broken the building into small sections. But here's a 3D view looking down, and you can see that the building kind of holds the edge of that kind of town center that you have off of Main Street. And it holds and defines that space as a center. And 5 stories on the right and the left, and it steps down to kind of like a bridge with a portico that you drive through to enter both garages and the restaurant as well. Moving it a little closer, you can see here how the building sits on the property, and the two wings with the different roof forms. At this location, you can see the train station is right there by the property, and you see the 2 big arches is where the parking is entered for residents and for the restaurant. These are additional views, so as I fly around, you really get a sense of how the building fits into the context. You can see on the lower wing, there's an outdoor amenity deck for residents up there that will have a nice view of the water. It's a common recreation space for residents, is sunbathing and grills or outdoor seating up there for residents to enjoy. Looking down. So this is the view as you approach the project from over the Shark River coming down 35. This is a sequence of views that helps you simulate your sense of entry into Belmar. So what I said earlier about the building having several different facades along 35, rather than have one complete wall, back up here, you can see that there's a series of components that line up on 35, so it doesn't feel like one continuous wall. So once you get to the center between the 2 Cs, you can see here is where your main entrance would be. The parking for the residents is on the left. This is a 2-way, one in and one out, and then there's a drop-off underneath the canopy, and the restaurant is there on your right, and we'll show you that as well. So here's an aerial view looking down from above the Marina Grill, and you can see here clearly how the two C shapes work. With the amenity deck, there's a pool, a green space, open above the parking, looking out over the water. This also helps you give you a nice perspective of the overall layout of the building. So there's the train station on the right, the existing 9-story residential building on the left, and you can see how our project really fits in to the context, even at 5 stories. I will mention that on the 10th and 8th Street sides of the building, it's reduced to 4. So there's a step back after the 4th floor to get to the 5th. So the facade along 10th and the facade along 8th is stepped down to 4 stories. Looking up towards the rail. So this is the corner on 10th. That's the retail space, where the retail space would be, where you have those red awnings. You can see the architecture for the residential building more close up. We have a series of bay windows, some architectural embellishments above the bay windows, like cornice lines and architectural motifs to create this kind of architectural style. And we're calling the building the Mediterranean because it seems to have that architectural style about the design. On 10th, the building is stepped back 25 feet from the curb line, so you have a wide area for outdoor seating and a setback from the curb. Overall view. This is the approach as you're moving towards the waterfront. Here, as I turn, you can begin to see that outdoor amenity deck in that 1C on the right-hand side of the building. And you see the several different roof forms to kind of break up the building into smaller components. And along 35, instead of having that continuous wall, we have these 4 separate facades that feel more like several smaller buildings than one large building. And this is the corner on 35. And here you can really see the components. So now I have, I'm going to finish off by just going to some visual simulation, some rendering. This is the site. Looking over 35 now, and this is a rendering of how the building would fit in more of a detailed design drawing, showing the middle section, which is where the restaurant is. You see that big atrium in the center. The entrance is on the roadway in between the 2 buildings, and the restaurant is 2 levels with an open bar on the roof that looks out over the water. The 2 amenity decks. Here's another view of what that restaurant would look like on the left. It's a covered roof area for outdoor bar and restaurant down below. And then the ground level there is the amenity for the residential component. And this is a rendering looking at 10th, where it meets the railroad. And you can see the retail on the corner, outdoor tables and chairs. And you can see how the building is set back on the top floor. To give you a 4-story feel on the street, and then the top floor steps back to reduce the overall mass. And here's that cross-section on the sidewalk on 10th. You can see it's a 25-foot setback, room for tables and chairs, a sidewalk, a landscape buffer, and a railing to provide some separation. And this is an overall rendering looking down. And when you're on that deck, for the amenity deck for the two courtyards, this is kind of the feeling that you would have in between those spaces. This is a building we completed with a similar deck, and it has a pool in there, and you can feel the scale of the building as it surrounds the pool, and that would have a view to the water. And here's a rendering of the restaurant, and that's the entrance to the restaurant, right off at 35. The parking is in the building, into the right, and you can have a drop-off there, and that restaurant would be a public open restaurant.
Would you mind going back 2 pictures to the overall aerial view? One more, there you go. Thank you.
And this is a couple of visuals of what that restaurant could feel like up on the top floor, looking down. This is the feeling we'd like to evoke on that bar restaurant on the top floor. And this is the view that you would see if you were up there dining. And this is just another example of what that could feel like in terms of the ambiance and the style of the outdoor restaurant we're trying to create. And here's another view. These 3 examples are other restaurants that would be designed in a similar way than what we're proposing here on the project. And this is the final view here. And there's a setting to the existing photograph so you get a sense of how it compares and how it fits. And that's my presentation. I just want to conclude by saying that, as I mentioned earlier, it's 224 units. There are 1 and 2 bedroom apartments here. There's 103 2-bedroom apartments and 121 1-bedroom apartments. There are 477 parking spaces, and the density here is 75 units per acre. And it's very similar, in fact, it's exactly the same as the new building that was just built to the left of the site. There is an 8,000 square foot open space behind the building between the rail line and the back of the building for plaza space, festival space, outdoor activities, public outdoor activities. And there is amenity spaces in the building for residents. There are 5,000 square feet of common amenities for residents. And the 2 courtyards that I mentioned that are outdoors, one's 17,900 square feet and the other one's 10,500, the smaller one. So that's general overall description of the proposal, and I will turn it over back to Mr. Russo.
Thank you, Dean. We appreciate you taking us through the design presentation again. I just wanted to take a few brief minutes to highlight a few of the plan changes that were made since Dean's last presentation for the governing body, and also to address some of the questions and concerns that have been raised recently about the overall project. So I have copies of a brief 4 to 5 page memo that we prepared in response to some comments that have been raised, which I'd like to hand out. I apologize, I probably have 20 copies, but we can make more and distribute them electronically as well.
so maybe first thing you can do is explain the changes they made from last night here.
Sure. So the planning process for this project actually started in late 2019, and that was at the time when we went under contract to purchase the property from the Rapetti family. And at that time, our concept plans were proposing, a very different building to what Dean proposed today. Some of the key differences were the unit count was a bit higher, it was closer to 300 units. We did not have ground level parking or a basement level parking level. We had parking that was above grade, and we also did not have the amount of retail, the restaurant, the bar space that we're currently showing in the plan. And there were more deviations in the plan at that time from what the Seaport redevelopment plan would have allowed. Not only deviations with respect to building height, which is the main deviation which the governing body is considering amending the plan to revisit, but there was a deviation with respect to the amount of parking spaces we were providing, with respect to the proposed versus required setbacks. And prior to the time that we appeared before the governing body this March, we had made changes to the plan in response to comments from the borough's professionals. And then again, after the March hearing, we made more changes. So as of today, the plan includes a compliant amount of parking. We have 477 spaces that are divided between dedicated for the residential uses and available for the retail and for public and commuter spaces. Fully complies with the requirements in the redevelopment plan. We reduced the unit count to accomplish a few things. One, to make sure that we had a compliant amount of parking, and also to have a more even distribution in unit sizes. Our prior plan version had some studio apartments. It had units that were very small and very large. And our current plan now has all one-bedroom and two-bedroom units that range between around 750 square feet on the low side and probably around 1,300 on the large side, which is a more balanced distribution, and the unit sizes are, more modest in size. And, we don't believe that, given the style of development, it would generate a significant number of school-age children. Notwithstanding that, we purposely did not propose any three-bedroom units so that we weren't creating a development that would generate a significant number of kids. And we have a lot of data on other projects throughout the state that we're happy to share in order to develop a reasonable estimate of the number of children. But the most important takeaway for tonight is we're down to building height. That's clearly a deviation from what the plan contemplates. The redevelopment plan, for those of you that have looked at it and read it, it was adopted in 2003. At the time it was adopted, this property was not included in the redevelopment area. The plan was largely limited to properties along Main Street that are much more proximate to single-family homes, to the lower height residential character east of Main Street. When this property was added to the redevelopment area in 2016, the plan standards were never modified or never tailored for this site. And we would argue that this property is very different from a planning point of view than many of the properties that front on Main Street, where a four-story building might be more appropriate. We are between a state highway and an active rail line. We're over 1,000 feet to the nearest single-family home. As Mr. Marchetto pointed out, we are surrounded by higher structures, and we're not proposing a higher building height because we want to build more units or because we think it detriments the plan or would have a negative impact on the community. We have studied a compliant plan. Dean referred to this. We could build the exact same density that we're proposing now with a four-story building that meets all the setback requirements in the plan. The building on 10th Avenue, that's about 60 units, is on 0.8 of an acre. That density, right, 75 units an acre, is exactly what our five-story building proposes. The difference between our plan and a four-story compliant plan is our footprint is smaller, we have bigger courtyards, we have more open space, and we think that the way the plan is designed, it has much more architectural interest. That summarizes the plan changes. I just want to very quickly, Mayor, touch on a couple other concerns that were raised, and then I'll turn it over to the governing body. We know that there's been concerns raised about the effects that the project would have on the community, and it's been suggested that the project would negatively affect the community. I would ask you to consider that this style of development is exactly what the redevelopment plan contemplated when it was adopted. There's been very little redevelopment in Belmar, notwithstanding the fact that the plan is approaching 20 years old. And a project like this that'll bring 300 to 400 residents to the Belmar downtown, that will provide a significant amount of public parking, which we know is always in short supply, especially during the summer seasons. That'll create public plazas, particularly along the rail line, and that'll also be a very significant rateable. This property, it's not fully utilized, I think is the nicest way to put it. It generates about $120,000 a year in annual taxes, and with our proposed development, it would be a much more substantial rateable, over $800,000 per year. In a community the size of Belmar, that's a meaningful additional revenue sources to those of you that are concerned about economic development and what your property taxes are. There was a concern raised about how long the project would take to be built and what the disruptions could be on the community during that 2-year period. Start to finish, 2 years is probably a reasonable estimate of how long the site would be under construction. But there have been many examples of projects like this built in downtowns with similar conditions, right? It is a tight site, it's a downtown location, but our company has significant experience building on sites like this, and we're committed to making sure that the project is planned well, it's organized well, it's kept clean, that the logistics of the site are what you would expect to see in a downtown environment, and it doesn't create a negative impact on the community. I'm not here to tell you that there'll be zero impacts. I mean, there's always impacts when the construction is being built, whether it's a single-family home that's being built next to you, or it's a commercial or a residential project like this. But I think the benefits of the project clearly outweigh the short-term negative impacts during construction. There's been concerns raised about traffic. We have, through our traffic engineer, done a full traffic impact statement in preparation for submitting a site plan to the planning board. We're not yet at that stage. This process of amending the redevelopment plan is only the very first step in the process. If the governing body does amend the plan and we are able to then go to the planning board, we anticipate having a very extensive technical review of our application by the board members, the board's professionals. As part of that process, we would submit our traffic report. We're happy to share it now with any members of the public that would like to review it in advance of it being formally submitted. But I will tell you that the conclusions of our report, which studied existing conditions and proposed conditions after our project was built, using ITE standards and DOT standards, which ultimately, because we're on a state highway, not only is Belmar going to have to approve our traffic report, but the DOT is going to have to approve it. And they're going to have a lot to say because our main access is off of 35. We meet all of the requirements for not impacting levels of service at all of the adjacent intersections around the site. And we're happy to share our full analysis on that. There was a concern raised about hurting Main Street businesses, that by building a project like this and having a restaurant and a bar and a small amount of retail space on the ground floor, that we'd be detracting from Main Street. Our feeling is that anytime you add a couple hundred residents to a downtown, and normally, we could have some seasonal renters, but we're not building a hotel here where the population is very transient and it's very slow in the winter months. This is a residential building that is expected to have a meaningful population even during this time of year, and those residents are going to live and shop in the downtown. And if we were building 50,000 square feet of retail here, I would understand the concern that, look, some businesses in town might look to relocate here. Outside of the restaurant and the bar, we're only building one small retail space that's 2,000 feet. And it's certainly not our intent to take somebody away from Main Street and put them in this project. there was a concern raised about sewer and water infrastructure and the fact that the infrastructure in Belmar is aging and is in need of repair. You know, we have had a number of discussions with Belmar's engineer to understand what improvements might be necessary in order for our project to be accommodated. We will need to get not only approval from the Belmar Engineering Department, but the South Monmouth Regional Sewer Authority and the DEP with respect to our utility connections. And we know that we're going to have to demonstrate that our project does not have a negative impact, and if off-site improvements are required in order for the project to be serviced, we're going to be prepared to work with the borough to make those improvements in a way that you know, represents not what we're legally required to do, but also in a way that helps the community. And then, you know, in closing, and I promise I'll wrap it up quickly after this, you know, I feel like there's been, you know, some, you know, false statements that have been made about the project, and we understand that we're still, it's not everybody knows about what we're proposing, and we hope that as there's more information is available, that, you know, the public will be more open to really studying the project and understanding, you know, all of its aspects and all of the pluses and you know, any potential minuses. I mean, I do believe that, you know, with the changes that have been made at the urging of the governing body over the last, you know, really over a period of 2 years now, this represents an excellent project for the downtown. This is not the end of the process, it's the beginning of the process, so there's going to be ample opportunity for more questions and comments. When you take the deviation with respect to building height, a 5-story building in a location like this is really not uncommon, and you know, we wouldn't be here proposing a 5-story building if we didn't think it was necessary for the project to be feasible, and if it didn't represent a better plan. You know, our family has been in the development business for over 50 years. We have never built and sold a residential building. We're looking to be a long-term member of the community, and we want to build something nice that we can be proud of and the community can be proud of, and we're looking to have the planning flexibility to be able to do that. This is a unique site. It's large, you know, in terms of, you know, other parcels in the downtown. It's close to 3 acres. You know, it is 1,000 feet from residential homes, which I think is an important consideration. And I would encourage you to, you know, in closing, to go back and read the redevelopment plan, including the amendments that were made as recent as 2016. I know the borough's planner is in the process of creating potential new amendments to the plan. And if you read the plan and the spirit of the plan, it wasn't intended to be a static document that never changed over time, right? The intent of the plan is to encourage economic development through quality projects. And, you know, there's a number of objectives in the plan that we feel this project is advancing. And I'm not going to read through all of them, but they have to do with strengthening the downtown, bringing new residents into the downtown, using underutilized sites more appropriately from a planning point of view. With that, I just want to thank everybody for being patient with us tonight, and we appreciate all your comments and questions. Thank you.
Any of the council members have any questions for Mr. Russo before you go?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Russo. Listening to Dean talking about when he came into Belmar tonight, he came over the bridge in 34 South. There's only one entrance so far to this complex, and it's on 35, correct?
There's 2 access points.
Okay.
There's a right-in, right-out access point from 35, which is only accessible if you're driving north on 35, which in our review of DOT's standards and looking at the existing access points on the property, right now there are multiple curb cuts from 35. We're only proposing one, which we believe the DOT will view very favorably. Normally they are not looking to increase curb cuts on a state highway, they're looking to reduce them. So we were very careful to make sure we only have one access point, and that we were not allowing left turns into the development going south on 35, except at 10th Avenue, where you can make a left at the traffic light, and there is an access, a driveway into the development off of 10th.
that's where I want to talk to you about. Because you have, on 10th Avenue, you've got the train tracks and a traffic light on 35. It's not much space for cars to get through. So if you have people coming east on 10th Avenue off 35 and then making that left-hand turn into the complex, the train comes in, the tracks are down, you're going against traffic, you're going to stop cars, somebody making a left-hand turn, stopping cars possibly on the tracks. I've got a
We
big
understand.
problem with that.
Look, it's a great question, and it's something that we know we're gonna have to address in detail through our traffic engineer once we get before the planning board. We're not looking to not address the question now, but, you know, I'm not a traffic engineer. One of our engineers is here tonight, but our traffic engineer isn't, and what I will assure to you is that, you know, not only will we satisfy Belmar that traffic and circulation to and throughout the site is safe, and that's going to come down to the planning board's discretion. We have to satisfy DOT, and we're prepared to make a very thorough presentation to address all of the concerns that you raised. There's no question the existing conditions at the 35-10th intersection at certain times is very busy, and we know we need to prove that all of the turning movements can be done safely. And it's going to be the planning board's, you know, discretion to determine if they're satisfied.
It's a big problem. I mean, that's a very big
If our traffic engineer was here, and I'm, you know, I could give you his report, he's studied it, and he does not believe it will create not only an unsafe condition, but we're not allowed to create a failing level of service for any turning movement. Going into every intersection, you could have over 10 turning movements, right? From every approach, and 10th Avenue, you have 4 approaches. You've got a through, you've got a right, you've got a left. Every one of those is a movement. So for that intersection, you probably have 12 turning movements. We have to show that for every one of those movements, we are not creating a failing level of service, and we will provide testimony to that.
Have you discussed any, like, alternatives? I mean, what if you find that DOT or whoever is saying that, you know, coming south on 35 and turning left on 10th and then waiting across in front of the tracks isn't going to work? Have you thought of any other alternatives about, you know, just kicking anything around?
There's always another alternative. I think one potential, which I think would probably not be viewed favorably from DOT's point of view, and I think they would say we don't meet the warrants for this based on the levels of service at 10th. You could theoretically have a left at 8th and access into the development off of 8th and 10th, so you have 3 access points. I think the problem with that is you lose a lot of flexibility between the building and the rail line to create what we're showing on our plan, which is a significant open space. If from a traffic point of view, it was absolutely critical to do that in order to have safe access, we would do it, but we would ask you and the planning board to first have the benefit of our full traffic testimony before requesting that we consider alternative access, because we do think what we have now is preferred.
And if I may, just I try to calm some of the nerves on this issue. As far as the parking, this is only a proposed. In the event you do go to the planning board, you are going to have to get permits to the DOT. You are going to have to read the traffic study. So these proposed points of ingress and egress aren't definitive. You're not married to them. And at that point of the proposed development, they could in fact change, correct?
Yes, we know that we are going to have to be prepared to address any questions or comments from the planning board. And if we feel, you know, what we have is you know, the way it should be done, we're going to have to defend that. And if we can't, we know we might have to consider changes. So we are looking to be cooperative and flexible. We just know that for purposes of tonight's hearing, you know, the detailed intricacies of the project from an engineering point of view aren't, you know, really, you know, what's being considered tonight. It's you know, the amendments to the redevelopment plan.
That's correct. I just wanted to make clear that the project that you proposed isn't the definitive. This is exactly what's going to happen. It can be changed moving down the line. It just really all depends on how the traffic study is interpreted by the board professionals, by the DOT, and based on your testimony at the time of planning. So, Council President Wong's comments could be changed. Correct.
Yes. In our plan is, we've been drawing for 2 years now, so we feel like it's not back of the napkin. We've laid out every unit, all the unit size. It's pretty well detailed, but it's not fully engineered, and it needs to go to the planning board, and it needs to be reviewed in detail. So we agree with your assessment.
So can we hear from our professionals on this? I mean, do you guys have like an initial take on this issue?
Honestly, on the traffic in the park, let's just do the traffic for now.
But
You
before
know,
you get there, I just want to not prejudice the applicant. It's a little premature to start.
no, I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with the question. You know, and as Mr. Russo stated, that's all getting flushed out in the planning board process. They have the potential to add a third point of access to the site. If they do, we lose something that we're always angling for, which is public space, open space. And that's that linear strip of property that runs along the railroad, back behind the smaller C in the two buildings. So we're very aware of everything. We've already discussed things with these guys in advance. We continue to do that. They've been very cooperative so far. But it's going to come down to really a planning board process to determine if we need the 2 or the 3 points of access.
I got some. So I want to start out with questions I have on the ordinance, which is up for first reading tonight, and then get to the document that you just reviewed. I have some questions on that. So my first question in the first paragraph is, this land has been developed and or has been constituted as an area in need of rehabilitation. So just curious from our planners, what criteria goes in from a planning perspective to identify a parcel of land that is in need of redevelopment?
So pursuant to the local redevelopment housing law, there are 8 criteria. I think there were probably 7 at the time because the statute had changed in 2019 that gets evaluated. This designation was done in 2005, I think. I was not the professional at the time. There is a study that I'm sure is on the record somewhere, but it's an evaluation of the area, and it's not just this property, these 3 lots, it's the entirety of the Seaport redevelopment, which is an expansive area that ranges from 35 to Main Street, from the waterfront to 10th Ave. An evaluation of the properties were done. The site could have been underutilized, there could have been properties that have been vacant, there could have been properties that were, in arrears on their taxes. There's a number of criteria. Now there's 8, as I said, but that statute had changed in 2019, specifically when the retail market started to decline. So there were some changes at that time, so there were 7 leading up to that, but that's not what this is. This area was declared in need of redevelopment. There's no proposal to modify that declaration. That's not what this proposal is. Subsequent to that declaration, there was a redevelopment plan proposed. It was initially approved in 2006. It was amended in 2015. This is a subsequent amendment proposal to you for this particular section of the entirety of the area. So how it was done, basically 16, 18 years ago, I couldn't tell you. I was not here at the time, but there are statutory criteria that would have had to be met. There were public hearings that would have had to been undertaken at the planning board, taken back to the governing body for endorsement of that process. There were notices that were required in the newspaper 2 consecutive weeks, etc., that were done at that time. But so the designation of the area is not being amended at all. It's just the criteria of the development proposals for now, in this particular 3-lot area that's being proposed with this.
All right, that's helpful, thanks.
You're welcome.
If this makes it to a second reading, I would be interested in knowing specifically what criteria were used under the law in previous years to identify.
So I would ask April, do you have those paperwork in your files? Because that predates our involvement in the borough by a lot. I believe so, yes.
My second question is that, I see this was done in 2003, 2011, and 2016. like when the redevelopment areas were, these plans were adopted and then re-adopted at those different dates, like what process goes through, does a municipality go through to make those changes? Is it done like this? Is it done at the borough council? Is it done at the planning board level, the zoning board level, combination of both? I'm just curious to see, because, I don't know, I wasn't here during that time either, how these processes go in a municipality.
So the process of the amendment for each of the prior acts is all treated the same as it's being done today. It's introduced on first reading, and thereafter it goes to the planning board for what's called a consistency hearing. At the planning board and its professionals review the proposed redevelopment plan against the master plan to determine whether or not the proposal is consistent. Now, if there's not consistent, they write down the recommendations, we review it, and we determine whether or not we're going to incorporate them on second reading, or if on a supermajority of the vote, just disregard them outright. Now, after it hits second reading, we have it just like a normal ordinance where we sit there, we introduce the ordinance again, we give the opportunity for public comment and hearing on it, and thereafter the council makes a vote on whether or not they're going to adopt it.
All right, so in this instance, the way I read this ordinance is it's coming to us first, then it goes to the planning board, which must review the amendment of the Seaport Village redevelopment plan, and then they send recommendations to us. So when this goes to them and they review it and they send recommendations to us, then do we have to reapprove it? So are these all preliminary approvals? Then it goes to the planning board and then they say with the, okay.
No, so it's like a normal ordinance. Say when we adopt an ordinance to go back to the Telecommunications Act, how we adopted the ordinance, changing the aesthetics to give the board some more authority on how certain co-locators could be, or boxes could be located on poles to provide the borough with more control over the aesthetic value. We adopted it on first reading, and then it went over to the planning board for their review. And that's kind of the same process here, where the planning board is presented with this proposed amendment to the redevelopment plan as written, and they get to determine it as written, if it's adopted on first reading, is consistent with the master plan. Now, based off of the redevelopment plan as it's written, they can determine just blanket, yes, it is, or no, and provide why. Then it's left to the borough council to consider their recommendations and say, yes, we agree with it, or no, we do not, and yes, if we agree with it, then we're going to incorporate that into the revised amendment on second reading.
Okay, so if we were to say, no, we don't agree with what they came back and recommended, then what?
You adopt it as if it's a regular land use ordinance. You adopt it as is. Like,
Okay.
I don't want anyone to misunderstand the process at the planning board.
There's not a public hearing at the planning board. The planning board's role under the redevelopment housing law on this particular entity is similar to section 26 under a normal land use ordinance. Their role is to determine, is this consistent with the master plan? Yes or no? And they can offer up recommendations, but that's all it is. It's not a public hearing. They're not adopting or approving anything. They're making recommendations to you. It comes back to you for a public hearing. You can either incorporate their recommendations or not. That's up to you. But the ultimate decision-making authority rests with you. The public hearing is here, and you decide yes or no at the end of the day. Their role is to decide whether it's consistent with the master plan. That's their role. That's it. They're not approving this or not approving it.
So that would mean, well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that would mean the revision process that Mr. Russo was referring to. That's not going to, if it makes it through first reading tonight and then it goes to the planning board, that's not that revision process he's talking about. That would come later in the process.
Correct, he's talking about the application.
Well, then my only other question would be, that would mean there would, if there is going to be a second reading, it's not going to be 2 weeks from tonight, right?
Well, I don't want you to misunderstand. This is not a development application
I understand.
hearing. So he's presented what his vision for this plan is. This process is the parameters from which that plan can be generated.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of the time.
Right, so it's basically, so the access points is a
No, that's, I'm
detail
not
of the
concerned.
site plan application that has not happened yet. That has nothing to do with what we're doing
No, I
tonight.
understand that.
Right, so there's nothing stopping this process from moving forward 2 weeks from tonight. That has nothing to do with it. That's a planning board issue that's gonna happen only if
Mm-hmm.
this process gets introduced tonight, goes to the planning board, comes back here 2 weeks from now, and then assuming, and I'm not opining
Okay.
one way or the other, that it gets approved, then they make an application later, right, because you still have to engineer it. I don't know, so how long later, months later, it goes to the planning board. All those minute details on the traffic studies, the
Mhm.
access points, the
I
drainage,
understand that.
that's handled there.
Yes.
I do want to note, though, if you want more than 2 weeks, then this process has to start over. Because you can't, and I'm not saying that's not okay, I'm just saying, you can't introduce tonight,
Mm-hmm.
carry over into the next calendar year, and
Oh,
adopt
right.
later,
That
right?
makes sense.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
So,
thank you.
so we would have to have this exercise again. And I'm not saying, no, yes, you should or shouldn't, I'm just saying,
Fine.
it can't carry over into another calendar year.
Jim, maybe you can just explain to council just what exactly we would be voting on tonight. Are all the standards met except for the height? Is that what?
So so there's a couple changes, and that are being proposed, which would be the subject of the introduction, right? So, and I think Mr. Russo, as well as his architect, kind of enumerated, that as it stands today, the height of what his proposal is not consistent with the redevelopment plan, correct? So the amendment, should you decide to act favorably, would allow for increased height. So right now, the way the plan is written is at the street, you're allowed 3.5 stories. Your proposal at the street is 4 stories, correct? It's not, I think it's less than 28 feet from the street, so the answer is yes.
Yes, that is correct.
And then as you move internal to the site, his proposal goes up to 5 stories, which is not permitted, to 60 feet, as it stands right now. So the plan is not the easiest for everyone to understand as it talks about height. It's, 3.5 stories at the street line. As you move in, it allows it to go up to 40 feet, and then there is some additional height that's allowed elsewhere, based upon the roof line, et cetera. But the way that the amendment is written is that it would allow for a 5-story building, which is ultimately what Mr. Russo's proposing, up to 60 feet. Whereas right now, it's a 4-story product, and the height ranges between 40 and 50 feet. Yes, right?
Yes.
In addition, there's a couple of other amendments for this particular area, right? So as it stands right now, the redevelopment plan is kind of one size fits all for the entirety of the area. So the use list that's permitted in the area is pretty expansive because you have varying locations. So the use list is also being amended for this particular location to exclude things like watercraft rentals because you're not on the water, right? So we have eliminated marinas and other types of uses that would be inappropriate. We are encouraging in this, or we're proposing in this, the restaurant, the bar, which is part of the proposal. So those are really the entirety of the changes associated with this particular proposal. The majority of the bulk standards, the area, the setbacks, the coverage, the parking requirements, those all remain the same as to what the plan is as of right now. So basically, this proposal that's up for first reading later on your agenda is to allow for the increased height, to allow for the proposal you just saw, and the modification of the uses. That's it. The balance of the plan remains intact.
Parking, all that.
Stays the same, correct.
They have the parking standards all.
Correct.
Now, I know in the plan, it says the council can give relief for public parking. Is there any, criteria or anything like that?
We can't hear you, Mark.
Sorry about that. I didn't have my mic on, sorry. My question was to our planner is that part of the redevelopment plan talks about if the developer is putting in public parking, it allows relief for some of the things in the project, but does it talk about what kind of relief
It's pretty vague in the
Vague.
plan as to what the relief is. I will state, however, and that's been a particular sticking point for myself as well as for Mr. Frieda, the project is parked RSIS compliant as proposed and has additional parking for public. So there's parking for the restaurant, there's public parking, and the residential parking is RSIS compliant. That was, basically, before we would even engage, that was an issue because we know parking in this area of town is a tremendous concern. So it does allow for it, but the proposal as is, and I do want to say, that's not really the subject of tonight. However, should this process move along, right? Should you choose to act favorably tonight and introduce, should the process go to the planning board, come back for a favorable action at a public hearing, there's going to be a developer's agreement between the borough and the developer in which all these details, access points, parking, all these minute details that you don't traditionally see in a traditional zoning application would be vetted out and approved. I don't mean to steal your thunder, but, so, I do pretend to be a lawyer sometimes. But this part of the process is simply the amendment to the plan solely for this area. And it's the 3 lots that we have, that was discussed as part of the proposal. So the focus on the ordinance that's before you for introduction and what the amendment would be is the modification of the uses, which is pretty much the elimination of uses that are not really pertinent to the site, this site, and the modification of the height. That's basically what this proposal would be when we get to the introduction later tonight, correct?
Nailed it.
Okay. Not my first idea.
Should I, just a couple other questions?
Sure.
So, Mr. Russo says in his document that the 4-story height limitation that is already the standard for this area was really meant for Main Street and closer to residential neighborhoods, not for this subject property. So on July 20th, 2016, when the Borough Council, again, before my time and I know before yours, but I'm just trying to get a history of the context of how we got to where we are today, because I want to understand this as well as I can. Why wouldn't that group have taken that into consideration at the time? I mean, we're stating that that's a mistake we thought they made, but why?
So I don't know the answer to your question.
Okay.
I can only opine as to my opinion all these years later.
Right,
This is a tremendous area.
right,
This redevelopment plan, I don't typically see redevelopment plans of this size. I mean, this is a big chunk of your community in this plan. And it ranges, the diversity in the properties are significant, right? So you have the property along the Shark River, like where Klein's is, that whole area along the waterfront. And then you have along Main Street, there's a piece of it that's on the east side of Main Street that immediately abuts the residential as you go towards the east, towards the ocean. It goes all the way to 35. It abuts the bridge, which is now elevated significantly, and that elevation, okay, so I'm gonna, anyone who knows me knows that I'm just bluntly honest. I don't know whether or not these amendments were made before or after the change to that bridge was made. After. So, one would think though, when you're dealing with an elevated highway, is there a reason why you keep the buildings at 35 feet when the highway exceeds that height? I don't know the answer to that, but what I will say is the plan has been in place for a long time. Even the amendment, which is 2015, based upon the plan, the ordinance or the official documentation that the governing body acted on was subsequent to that in 2016.
Correct, yeah.
You're still talking, now we're heading into 2022, and there hasn't been a tremendous amount of action. So one then has to take a step back and say, do we really want this to redevelop? Do we really want this to move? And if the answer is yes, then we have to think, what steps do we take to make that possible? And I'm not saying blanket do whatever you want, because he could tell you, I have not been the nicest person in this process at all. So, like, the word bitch comes to mind a lot. But I will say that you have to take a step back and say, I did say it. The plan that was prepared, 15 years ago, and then modified almost 10 years ago, 8 years ago, is, things change over time, and it's not moving, right? And I will say that it's also very difficult, and I work in a lot of surrounding towns, and a lot of the surrounding towns have the same issue. They envision that these things are going to be done by one person, right? So one size fits all, no big deal, and you have a lot of individual property owners who have a lot of individual agendas, who have a lot of value in their property. Property values have increased over time, so there's a lot of changing factors. So I don't know 100% why, but I can only speculate that all these factors have played into the fact that not much has happened. And again, it's up to you guys. If you guys say, we're going to sit back and wait to see if somebody can come and address this area in the way it was handled years ago, that is kind of why you get paid the big bucks, right? But if not, this is kind of this is a proposal to see whether or not this is something you're interested in even entertaining.
So in a Seaport redevelopment area, what are the council's rights? I know Mr. Russo said he has a design. I haven't seen that. I would be interested in seeing that completely complies with the Seaport redevelopment code. If he were to come to us with that design in a Seaport redevelopment area, is that something, would he even come to us, or would he go straight to the planning board?
Go
ahead. And if you were to come to us, even if it does comply, is that something we would have to approve? I guess that's a legal question.
I think the answer is yes, but we're certainly not looking to come to the board with a different application concept than what we've proposed up to this point. We did do a study of a compliant plan because we felt it would be something helpful to have as part of the process. I'm happy to send it to Ms. Beam and the borough so it's aware of it and can review it. It's not very attractive, to be honest with you, and I don't mean architecturally. I mean, when you look at the massing of the building, it has very small courtyards, they're internal, they don't take advantage of the viewpoints from the exterior of the site, and the residential footprint is large because the Seaport redevelopment plan, the setback requirements are not significant. We're not interested in building a lower building that's much less quality just because, hey, we can get it done and we can get it built and move on. We're interested in building really good, nice projects.
Yeah,
and what I would say to you, that comes from, you raise an important question about the past and how come this hasn't been addressed before the building height. Ms. Beam raised a very important point. There's well over 100 properties, 100 lots in this redevelopment area. I served on the planning board in my town for 9 years. I was the chairman for 2. We spent a lot of time doing master planning. I can tell you, we did not go lot by lot by lot and say, okay, what's the right setbacks and standards or building height for this lot versus the next lot. It's hard to do in such a big area. And absent an application from a developer that the governing body might have been considering at the time, it probably didn't get a lot of thought. They probably just, stayed the course and said, these are the standards that were adopted in 2003. We're expanding the redevelopment area, and these are the standards that can apply. Nothing has happened. Very little redevelopment has happened since the plan was adopted, and I think that says a lot about whether the standards are reflective of what's needed in today's market and what's feasible and what's not.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so Patrick, in a Seaport redevelopment zone then, if developer came to us with a fully compliant plan, is the council then obligated obligated to approve that, or do we still have discretion in that process?
You're not involved. So
Okay.
if he, as the developer, is willing to work with the council and come up with a plan that you guys like, at the end of the day, it's up to the planning board.
Okay.
You personally could love the plan, but if once it's in the planning board's hands, it's their jurisdiction, it's outside of the council's jurisdiction.
Okay. If we were to, and we're not passing this tonight, it's just for first reading, but if this were to pass at second reading, does this create a precedence or potential legal argument for other developers in this redevelopment, Seaport redevelopment zone to have a similar height of 60 feet?
No, so this amendment is only for these specific 3 lots. As far as the balance of the redevelopment zone, those restrictions are still, any proposed developer would have to be compliant with the redevelopment plan as it exists. The amendment that's before the board today is only for specifically lots 1, 2, 3, block 87.
Okay. You've been working on this for a while.
Yeah, a little bit.
You know, this came up in the past regarding the residential dwelling units. The number of units has been reduced. There's no more studios. They are all residential units. They're all monthly rental apartments. Does the council have the right to approve or disapprove or modify or not modify, adopt a resolution based on the type of unit?
No, so as far as what is going to be adopted, what's going to be permitted to be built there is in the planning board's hands. Now, on the amendment as it's written before you, there does itemize very specific uses that are permitted. Now, if one of those permitted uses that are proposed you disagree with, based on the caucus of council, we could eliminate one of those proposed uses. For example, I saw hobby shops. Say council disagrees and hobby shop shouldn't be a permitted use on lot 1, 2, or 3. We can eliminate that from the amendment. But as far as what's going to be built there, once the amendment is, if the amendment is passed on second reading, as long as the developer goes to the planning board with a proposed development that complies with the permitted uses, the planning board would have jurisdiction. Now, in the event the developer wants to build, say, let's go with the soccer field, because I don't believe a soccer field is permitted on these 3 lots. They would need to have some sort of amended, would have to receive a use variance, which isn't a permitted use, and then that would be taken out of the planning board's hands and put into the zoning board.
So you can't have a use variance from a redevelopment plan.
Can't have use.
You have, so I think your question is, if you're concerned about rentals and you would prefer home ownership, you have the ability in the amendment to dictate home ownership. You also have the ability in the developer's agreement to dictate home ownership. That's different from traditional zoning where you don't have the ability to dictate that. So you do have the ability to do that. If they don't comply with what you approve in the plan, and there's a D variance, which has come up in other instances on like FAR, which is also another D variance. You cannot get a D variance from a redevelopment plan. The plan would have to be amended in order to accommodate it. So if your concern is they're proposing rentals and you want home ownership, that's something that we can address. It can be addressed in the amendment, it can be addressed in the developer's agreement, and then, there would be a discussion. I understand, listen, we're not getting into the weeds of it, I'm just giving the overall explanation of what their rights are as a governing body. But if that's your concern, you do have the right to dictate how that goes in this amendment and in the redevelopment agreement.
Okay. I have a couple other questions.
Yeah, no, but I just want to, it sounds to me like what's before us for today with the ordinance is basically defining the envelope within what the building will fit,
Correct.
right? So.
Plus a tweak of what's allowed.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. But the minutia, these other details about, well, do we want home ownership? Like, we can do all that in the redevelopers agreement if we want. We don't have to do both, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so like this, that, if we say, oh, well, you know, we don't want any rentals and we really want, whatever, condos, that can all be spelled out or hashed out in the redevelopers agreement.
Correct.
Okay, so we're not, I guess the point I was trying to
You're
make.
not tied to it
We're
based
not
on
pinning
tonight.
ourselves.
Correct.
Or hamstringing ourselves with, if we pass this. Okay.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
I know this is not a technical review, but I just have two
No,
technical
no problem.
questions. So 4 stories is allowed there, we're being proposed 5. However, when I read these documents, I see that the current height is 35 feet and the proposal is 60. So if we only need 1 more story, why are we having
Okay,
another
so
25 feet?
so the plan is, very intricate in how you measure building height.
Okay.
It is not, like, in your balance of your zoning ordinance, and you have your bulk table, right? You scroll across, I'm in this zone, this is the building height. That's not how this reads. So this reads that, you know, the maximum height at the street line should be 28 feet. As you move back, at the eve of 3.5-story building, it shall not exceed 39 feet 6 inches. And then you move on a little bit farther, and it talks about based on the design guidelines, where the eve above the 3rd story is constructed at a height greater than 38 feet, the slope shall be 4 on 12. And then it goes on to say any portion of the dormer constructed above 39 feet 6 inches, they should be stepped back a minimum of 16 feet. Where a roof line is above this 39.6, you know, the maximum height of the roof ridge line shall not exceed 52 feet above grade as measured from the center line Main Street. So it's not one number. It's the way this was written. I would not have written it this way, but the way that this was drafted, and there's all kinds of exhibits in there that shows varying heights depending on where you are and how it steps back. It's not one rectangular box. It's geared towards shifting, like incrementally increasing the height as you move off the road, basically. So it depends on where you are on the site, is what I'm trying to say. It's maddening from my perspective when I'm trying to review stuff. But, so, yes, at the street line, you're talking about like a 3.5-story building, which is traditionally 35 feet, but here we're talking like 39.6, and then it can graduate up. But when you're talking about roof height, and you're talking about pitch on roof, you're talking about midpoint, average between even and peak, it can go, the peak could be 52 feet. So really what we're talking about is 52 feet to the peak, but this is 60 feet period, right? So you're talking about an 8-foot difference. So you're talking about a 4-story building to a 5-story building. And as presented, which would come out in this details of this redevelopment agreement, should we get through this process, there was a commitment that on the street line, there's a setback to give the public open space along the street, so it's not cavernous along the street, 4 stories, and then the 5-story building is centered to the site between 10th and 8th. It's not 5 stories for the entirety of the structure. And those details, if you guys are amenable to this, and again, I have no opinion one way or the other, would be vetted out in the redevelopment agreement. All those little details would be vetted out. And I would seriously recommend that a concept plan similar to what was presented that shows that incremental stepping be attached to the redevelopment agreement, so there's no misunderstanding on what, when you get to that point. But that's multiple steps down the road.
Yes, I'm just reading the documents I have. It doesn't go in all that detail. So we're not going from 35 to 60. We're going 52 to 60 max.
Max, yes.
I have one other little technical question.
No
and
problem.
then I'll stop talking. So in the ordinance, we have here number 2, restaurants and brew clubs excluding fast food, but allowing cocktail lounges and outdoor activities. How is fast food defined?
So fast food, in my opinion, would be, you walk in, you place your order, they stick it in a bag for you, and you leave.
It would be
It's
like
not
a chain
takeout.
restaurant?
Pretty much, like a McDonald's, a surf taco, those types of things. It doesn't equate to, like, listen, and things have changed, let's be honest, since COVID, right? So most restaurants now have more prevalent takeout than they did prior to COVID. But it doesn't mean you have a nice restaurant where you can order takeout and go in there. That's not, the intent of a fast food is turnover, right? So if you can go into a nice restaurant and get food to go, that doesn't equate to fast food. You're talking more like a chain restaurant. I think in my head, the majority of fast food has like a drive-through or those types of things, but yes, it's more of a chain situation.
And they're currently prohibited anywhere in the borough, aren't they?
Yes. Well, not fast food, because you do have fast food, you just don't have drive-throughs. Like you have surf taco, I would consider that fast food, right? Sorry. Sorry. I'm not saying I don't like it, I'm just. No, I'm really not.
So again, I know we're at first reading tonight, and after first reading is the opportunity to really get to hear from the public and get public feedback. But you, Mr. Russo, would provide that other rendering to us, the one that's in compliance?
It's a floor plan, set
Or
of site
floor
which
plan,
we can
yeah.
provide.
And then you're also going to provide us with the traffic study. And then I guess my question is, does the borough then do its own traffic study, or do we believe on what's submitted by the applicant?
So typically, as with any development application that goes to whether it be the planning board or the zoning board, the applicant presents their documentation, and then your professionals review that and provide comment. If they don't agree with the assertions, whether it's drainage, traffic, whatever, there'll be a multitude of comments provided in a letter. And there's a separate step here, right? That interim development review, what's the name of that?
Technical
TDRC.
design and
Right.
review.
So there's like multiple steps here that most towns don't have, where all those issues come out. It's not typical for a municipality to have their own independent studies done. I mean, it's not unheard of, you certainly could do that, but, when a development application comes in, they post escrow from which your professionals draw against. So it's more, we review what they say, and then we say we don't agree, and then they're most often inclined to modify their information, because if they don't, it doesn't usually go well when they get to the board. But we don't typically do our own independent.
Could we ask the developer to provide an escrow for an independent company to come in and do a traffic study?
You could, but they're not obligated to say yes.
That all comes into a redevelopment agreement, right?
Okay, that's, all my questions. I was just trying to get a better understanding of exactly what we're doing, so everybody is on the same page, ask those questions. And, I'll just share with you, Mr. Russo, since we met last time, the feedback that I've gotten as a member of the council, are regarding density and traffic. Basically, those are the two main themes that I've gotten from feedback from residents that I've seen. I mean, there's a lot of other concerns, but those are really the major ones.
We understand and we're prepared to address those in detail before the planning board, especially traffic. We know, fortunately, when it comes to analyzing traffic conditions, there's very set and defined standards, whether it's ITE, whether it's DOT, so there's usually not a lot of, there's not a lot of leeway when it comes to the data. The data is the data, and we know we have to present it, and the borough has to approve it. With respect to density, I mean, I do want to make the point again that this amendment to the plan is not about allowing more density. I think the four-story plan that we're going to submit is going to prove that, and the project that's on 10th Avenue, right around the corner from us. Check it out. It's 0.8 acres, it's 60 units, it's 75 units an acre. That's the exact same density that we're proposing. It's about a smaller footprint and a better design. And just to touch on two of the other comments about home ownership versus, rentals. We did, the question came up during our March hearing, and we testified, in quite a bit of detail about, the differences between for sale and for rent, and, the financial feasibility, the financeability of both prospects. In this location, we are absolutely convinced that for sale housing is not feasible, but the benefits of for sale housing. I think why people are drawn to for sale housing from a planning point of view is the perception is, oh, the quality of the building's gonna be better, the quality of the amenities, the quality of the resident, meaning it's less transient housing. You can have all those things in a luxury rental community. And you can hold us and any other developer to a high standard when it comes to the design of the buildings, the facade treatments, how the building's programmed, and get the same thing from a planning point of view out of a rental project than you can get out of a for sale project. This is not going to be an inexpensive rental project. This is going to be probably the highest rental building in Belmar, because it's certainly going to be the most expensive to build, and it's going to be with amenities that and the amount of parking and the location that are a little bit different than what's been built to date. So it's got to be a quality project, and we'll stick our neck out and say, if the governing body, through the amendments it makes to the redevelopment plan, or the planning board, hold us to a high design standard, we're going to meet that standard. But I want to put on the record that we can't commit to doing for sale housing, because I know it's not feasible.
On the rentals, you won't be allowing seasonal rentals, will you? This will be year-round?
Yes. You might have somebody that signs a 13-month lease or a 26-month lease who might not be living in their home during the winter months. You could have some of that, but we would be renting for a full year. There's very limited circumstances when we'll do less than a
And no
full year.
subletting?
No, our residents aren't able to sublet.
And no VRBO?
No VRBO, no Airbnb, no, absolutely not. Not that we're against that, it's just not, for the reasons why you would probably feel it's not appropriate, we feel it's not appropriate. There are many other Airbnb, VRBO options in the community. This building doesn't need to be another one.
Okay, any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Russo.
Thank you.
All right.
Excuse me, in light of all the information that's been done here, the public hasn't had an opportunity to weigh in. Since you've been discussing the ordinance, I was going to hold this on to later, but I know a lot of people in the audience have questions about the ordinance in particular. And before...
Well, we're not going to... There's a public hearing at the next meeting,
But that's going to lose the effect of all of the information that has just been done here. And I think the public has a right to weigh in. I mean, Mr. Russo has been given, what about it, over an hour to make a presentation, not only about his development, but how, this ordinance should be approved. And I understand it's the first reading, but the council can certainly approve public comment at this point to allow, while it's fresh in everyone's mind, rather than put it off for 2 or 3 weeks. And I think the public deserves it. And we had a lot of information, a lot of good information. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
I'm Jennifer.
But Jennifer, I think, has provided excellent information, and I think it's the right for the public to be able to get up here and say, whether or not that ordinance should be passed. I think the impression I've got from most people, without going into the nitty-gritty, is that the project is too big. And I think that the gist I get from most people is that project, it shouldn't even go to a first reading. I think you can end it here and let them come back and do another amendment to the ordinance. And by the way, just so you know, Mr. McCracken, all of the other amendments to the plan, they change the area of the plan. This is the first amendment that's actually changing the use and the height. Right? None of the other ones changed anything but kept adding parcels to the property, to the Seaport Redevelopment Plan. So I think we should have the public weigh in at this point. 2 weeks from now, it's too late, really, because what's happening is what I complained about before. You give us a little bit of information, a little bit of time right before you vote, and then you say, okay, let's vote. And it's too late. I think there's been enough questioning by you to know that, this isn't ready for prime time. And I think there are at least 3 of you up there in your heart of hearts who knows that this should not be passed. So,
And I'm asking you to not introduce this ordinance tonight.
If I can, there's no public comment on first reading. This is just merely for introductory purposes. The public comment that Mr. Bucafusco is requesting of you is supposed to occur at second reading when the public hearing is offered. There's no public hearing on first reading.
But there's nothing that would prohibit the council from allowing it.
Well, it hasn't even been introduced on first reading. We haven't even got to that part of the agenda. We're still in the
But the
workshop.
council can approve a public session
So
for
you're
comments,
asking,
right? There's nothing that says you can't have a public session before a first reading.
so if I'm understanding you correctly, you would like the council to go out of order, violate Robert Rules of Procedure, and then have them institute a public comment on an ordinance prior to it being introduced on first reading for the council's consideration?
Exactly.
Well,
But they don't
I
follow
can't
the rules
imagine
now.
that's correct.
You're supposed to have a roll call at the beginning of the meeting. We've never had a roll call at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
So, I mean, come on, you know?
I understand your point. I'm going to disagree.
Which is more important, Robert's Rules of Order or the people here who want to speak and give their opinion as to what goes on?
Following the law is more important. And
Oh, don't start.
Don't
Don't
start.
start there.
I can't
Because there's
permit.
3 people up there who need to know about following the law, and they know what I'm talking about.
And now I'm going to counsel you and
Right.
advise you to not provide any more comments on that
Well,
because
I'm
it is an
sorry.
active issue.
This
And
should
you-
not be passed tonight. I know 3 of you, at least 3, you know in your hearts that this should not go forward. There's no rush. I suggest, have a little courage. This is a win-win situation. You can do something for the town, you can do something for the residents. Put it off, get more detail, get the traffic study, and just pass it, when it needs to be passed. But I think you're losing an opportunity to get input from the public here. That's my view.
That's your opinion.
Where's everybody else who's going to get up and talk?
Are we allowed?
Thank you very much.
Are we allowed?
No.
Are we
I just
allowed
spoke
to
for
talk
10
or
minutes.
Are we allowed to ask questions? Can maybe do that?
Not.
I'll tell you this, I will allow questions for the developer and limit it to just the developer. If you have a question for the developer while he's here, I'll allow that.
I do. Hi, I'm Maria Rondinaro, 1246 Pine Tree Way. I thought with the parking, Mr. Russo, when last we had the Zoom meeting, I thought that the number was 510 parking spots that were supposed to be allowed. Where did I get that number? Because that's what was mentioned at that March 18th meeting.
Well, we reduced the number of units, so now he has the proper amount of parking spaces.
Okay. So I didn't come here in my sixth of the 10th vehicle. I came here in my full vehicle, and my husband has a vehicle, and most people at this point had 2 vehicles. You would only be leaving about 30 parking spots for people for restaurants or any additional parking. That's not nearly enough.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry, Mr. Mayor. The testimony that we're going into is dealing with traffic analysis and the parking, and it would be all incorporated into the planning board's application. The developer here is a company, so the developer is compelled to be represented by counsel. Because the developer, and I'm sorry, I don't know your qualifications, I don't know if you're an attorney, and if you are one, so be it, but otherwise, he's not represented by counsel here, and the testimony that he could be providing, if he states incorrectly, could bias and prejudice his application, could potentially be used against us. So
That's not the problem.
you can ask the developer to reiterate his testimony, but I'm gonna ask you not to ask him what led him into his analytical reasoning of how he was able to develop that to be sufficient, because that's something that would be presented at the planning board, if in the event that you even got that far.
So are there more than 100 spots for people who are not living there?
So I also have to interject. I get he presented the big picture, but that's not what this action is about. This action is about an amendment to the plan. If the amendment is successful, and I have absolutely no idea whether it is or is not going to be successful, then they're going to have to make an application to the planning board, at which there will be a public opportunity. But at this time, we're talking about a conceptual design from which an amendment to the plan is being proposed.
The action that the governing body is going to take is to introduce an ordinance to amend the plan, which is basically the zoning. It's not a development application. So I know it's very hard to separate the two, and I'm not being critical of what you're asking at all. I'm just trying to, you know, he was very legal in his assertion, which is kind of his job. But my point, like, we have to be very careful. What we're here tonight, like, he made a presentation, which is great to kind of give us the big picture, but all those little nuances, which 100% I think are extremely important, and I'm sure if you spoke to him offline, he could tell you that every single thing you're saying, I've said 1,000 times to him already. So, and Ed can attest to the fact that probably less nice than you have been. But right now, we're talking about the standards from which a plan is being prepared.
Yeah.
So
Please stick with the zoning laws. We have a community to protect. I live in this community. I live down the street. There are fast food restaurants. There's the Windmill and there's the Dairy Queen. And that's where we live, right on Route 35. Please know your residents and listen to them.
Attorneys that have
Can I respond? Can I respond to
explained
that?
I cannot take any more questions
Well, that's
because,
not fair, that's not fair.
well, I gotta listen to what the attorneys tell us, and so it could disrupt everything that we have, so.
Because we're going off kilter here, and this isn't an opportunity for public hearing on the ordinance on what it's amending. And as far as the developer, he doesn't have to answer any questions, and what he provided is already above and beyond, because he essentially introduced his application without actually making a formal application to the planning board. So as far as, again, any analytical reasoning, again, Mayor, we can shut down public comment on this. There's no requirement for us to proceed.
We're gonna have to,
Okay, then.
that's what you're telling me, we gotta shut down public comment on this here.
Because it isn't even public comment, it's just a more or less an invitation for the public to talk. But this is what the purpose of.
Residents to talk.
And I completely agree, and I'm so sorry, I don't really know who I'm talking to right now, but you are correct, you guys are residents, but that's the purpose of the second reading and the public hearing, for the residents to come up, to testify, to provide, ask any question you could think of as far as the ordinance. So why did we choose 60 feet as opposed to 59.5, or why did we choose the 60 feet as opposed to the
52.
this crazy rendition that existed previously? That's the purpose of second reading. That's not what's here today. This is strictly for introductory purposes, so that the public is aware that the ordinance is going to be heard on public hearing. And that's it. So I'm sorry, I have to advise the public that there's going to be no more further public comment on this issue until after it hasn't even been introduced on first reading. So as far as that's concerned at this point, Mr. Mayor, as far as the point of the agenda, we are still at the workshop discussions, and you can choose to move on to petitions if there's nothing further from the council.
Okay, that's what we're gonna do, we have to shut it down, sorry. All right, do we have anything more on workshop? All right, April, move on to petitions.
I did not receive any petitions.
Thank you. Approval of minutes for November 9th.
Can I have a motion to approve the November 9th minutes?
Motion. Second.
Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Councilman Long? Mayor Walsifer?
Abstain.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes. Reports of council. Councilman Carvelli.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'll make it short. Hope everyone's enjoying their holiday season so far. Saturday was Christmas tree lighting, Piano Plaza. A great tree this year. DPW did an awesome job with lighting and decorations, so thank you for that. And also thanks to the fire department and police department for escorting Santa. I also wanted to mention that I really like the way the light posts look along Main Street this year. I tend to run across Main Street at 15th Avenue early in the morning. Basically, it's still dark out, and there's practically no cars on the street. You know, you look north and poles all the way up to the bridge. It's just kind of cool. So I think it's a great festive addition downtown. 2 Saturdays ago was the first annual polar plunge to benefit the Monmouth County SPCA at DJ's. I did not do the plunge, but I did stop in. I believe I heard they raised over $80,000, so it sounds like that was a success. And 3 weeks ago was the Municipalities Conference, which I attended, and I was able to attend a seminar on 5G wireless deployment, which obviously we're dealing with in town currently. I know that I think we're still in litigation with Verizon, but the takeaway for me was that it's good that we have the 5G ordinance that we put in place a while back. It helps ensure that carriers basically have ground rules to go by and helps with pole pollution, minimizing how many poles we have and whatnot. So that is my report, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Cracker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had an opportunity to attend the menorah lighting here in town. It was a very nice event, the reception at Randall afterwards, and I'd like to thank Randall certainly for hosting that. Events like that are what make Belmar is what it is. Nice events where we can come together as a community and celebrate special occasions. I'd also like to thank you, John, and your team. The town looks great. The lighting, the holiday lights here around the municipal building, Piano Plaza, and up and down Main Street certainly make our community look beautiful, and I know your staff worked very hard on doing that. I'd also like to bring up at the last council meeting, which seems so long ago, was brought to our attention by a resident that the flagpoles over in Monument Park were not lit. Immediately following the meeting, went down there, that resident was correct, and the next day, the municipal pole was lit. The repairs were made that needed to be made to light that municipal pole. It is also in need of paint. It's going to be painted in the spring. And the fireman's pole, where there's also an American flag, was never lit, has no lighting on at all. That flag was taken down, and DPW is putting together a design to get lighting on that pole so that flag can stay up and be lit. So, I'd like to say that we appreciate the comments from residents in town who come to us and point things out to us, and we acted on that situation immediately after the meeting, same day, and corrected one of the issues, have a plan to paint the pole, and the other one is a little more complicated because we've got to get power to that light, that flagpole to get it lit. So that's it.
All right, thank you, Councilman Brett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really quick, I wanted to remind everybody that today, December 7th, is the day that will live in infamy. 80 years ago today was the attack on Pearl Harbor. I can remember being a kid, and it was definitely in living memory. 3 of my uncles served in the Second World War, so we made a point of making sure that everybody remembered that day. Christmas tree lighting, outstanding. Great job from the band. It turns out that was their holiday concert, which is why the band was there, and the chorus. They're not going to do an indoor event because of COVID, so that was their chance to perform, and I thought they all sounded great. The kids were great. The mayor's ball, fantastic. Kudos to the entire committee. It was really a really nice event. It's great to see everybody there. None of my commissions met, but I did attend the Atlantic Wind Ensemble concert last night for Belmar Cares. I'm ashamed to admit that that's the first time I've actually heard that band. I've heard about them for years, and they were outstanding, and it was very well attended. I would say there was at least 120 people there. And one other thing, I wanted to give a shout out to the chief. She's not here, she had to go, but after I left that concert, I drove down Ocean Avenue, and there were the cars at 7-Eleven. And I would guess there were maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 cars, and the people walking around in the parking lot, walking across the street, and there were 2 sheriff's cars, and there was a Belmar PD, at least one that I saw. I know there were probably more. And I would not have known they were there. I couldn't hear them during the concert, but the band was pretty loud. And so shout out to Belmar PD and our chief for handling that situation. It was really, I think, if I hadn't seen them, I wouldn't have known they were there. And that's the way we want it. And that's my report. Thank you.
Council President Warren.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to say the same as Tom. I was at that concert last night for Belmar Cares. It was terrific. And the same, when we came out, we saw 3 people from the sheriff's office. Figured something must be going on. And I did take a ride down, and as Tom said, it was well under control. It was quiet. There was absolutely no problem. So I had one committee meeting, ADA meeting, and they are looking for new members. So if anybody is interested in joining the ADA, just send me a text here at belmar.com, and I'll put you in touch with the right person. And that's all I have to say, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple things that I have real quick. John, you guys in DPW did a great job. They did lighting up our town and really making it festive. We do have this year the Christmas light basically competition going on. I know we have 15 houses that have signed up. So if you're putting lights out, you want to sign up and be in that, be judged on
Yeah, the lights are a lot of stuff like that.
Anyone else is on? Yeah. Okay. So, if anybody wants to sign up, there's still room on that list to sign up, and I'm not sure exactly when the judging is going to be going on. The other thing I want to point out is that Santa's going to be riding around town like they do every year on December 16th. So if you have younger children and you want Santa to stop at your house, please contact our chief. At the police department, she's organizing it, and she'll make sure that Santa stops. So, and that's basically all I have. So we'll move on to public session on any of the resolution items.
If anyone would like to comment on the resolutions listed on the agenda, please step forward and state your name and address. Can I have a motion to close the public session?
So we can ask a question?
Only on the agenda, only on the resolution items. Those are public session at the end.
Of this meeting?
Yes, on this meeting, yeah, there's a public session at the end. This is just for the resolution items.
Okay, can I have a motion to close the public session? All in favor?
Aye.
Can I have a motion to approve the resolutions as listed on the consent agenda?
Motion.
Okay. Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Councilman Vaughn? Yes. Mayor Walsifer?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Next is second reading and public hearing on ordinance 2021-35. This is an ordinance amending the section regarding the ban of plastic bags and plastic straws. This is open for public comment. If anyone would like to comment on this ordinance, please step forward, state your name and address.
Seeing none.
Can I have a motion to close the public comment?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then can I have a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-35?
Second.
Okay, Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Councilman Vaughn? Yes. Mayor Walsifer?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Next is ordinance 2021-36. This is an ordinance amending the Seaport Redevelopment Plan. Can I have a motion to offer for first reading and introduction?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Councilman Brennan?
I get to go first. All right, please bear with me. It's been a long meeting already, but I do have a few thoughts. I actually wrote them down, which is, for me, is a big deal. Look, first I want to acknowledge that everybody up here believes that this property needs to be redeveloped. Definitely. It is underutilized, and the Belmar motor inn is problematic, and that's putting it kindly. And the owner and his family are definitely, they're entitled to a return for all their decades of operating, their businesses on the property. And I appreciate the mayor's efforts to resolve this issue, to try to move it along, so we can all move forward. However, as a councilman, I have to consider what's best for the whole community, not just evidently what's best for one piece of property or one property owner, what's best for the whole town, I guess you'd say. And this is actually, I think it's a profound change. I don't mean to sound too dramatic, but it's kind of a watershed moment, and this is why I think that. I mean, one of the first things I thought when I saw the design, before I even know who the architects and designers were, was well, this is just like Pier Village. Well, lo and behold, And, if you drive up through Long Branch, which I do fairly regularly, and you drive along Ocean Boulevard, and you try, when they first put one development in, it was pretty nice, everybody was nice, but now there's all up and down. You can literally drive a mile along the ocean, be 1 block away from the ocean, and you can't see the water at all. You can't see anything. You wouldn't even know. You wouldn't even know you were there. All you can see is the back of these 5, 6, 7, 8-story buildings. Now, that's not really what's happening here, but, we've all heard concerns from residents. We've all heard, especially during campaigns, about they're concerned about overdevelopment. They definitely are. They're worried about this is too big, and the mayor and I had a great conversation the other day about people who are worried about change. Change can be scary, and change is part of life. Yes, that's absolutely right. But some changes aren't necessarily for the best. And one of my big concerns is that if we approve this ordinance and it goes through, then we're looking at the slippery slope. And I think I want to also thank the professionals for all their input tonight. That was very educational, really helped me a lot. But one of the things you kept saying is there's been no action on this piece of the Seaport Redevelopment District. There's been no action here. So maybe if we go up, maybe there'll be action. Well, what's to stop some of the other property owners in the Seaport Redevelopment Zone to say, hey, we'll go up and then we'll get some action here? It just strikes me as we are deciding what's the future of Belmar going to be right here, right now. I really think that's part of what we're doing right now. Do we want to be Belmar by the sea, or do we want to be Pier Village by the river? And thanks, please. Look, I applaud the developer. I think it's a beautiful building, and they really did go out of their way to address a lot of the concerns that I personally expressed to them. And it boils down to it's too big. It's too big, and I have to vote no.
Councilwoman Wong?
I feel the same way Tom does. I've been hammering this thing through my head for weeks since I first saw this thing, and they did bring it down somewhat. I'm not against the redevelopment. It should be developed. And a part of the changing part of Belmar is not a big structure. The changing part of Belmar happened when all our little cottages that we knew, the houses with the awnings, when they all disappeared for McMansions. Those are the changes that happened in Belmar. That's why it's not that cute little town. And it happened to Spring Lake, and it happened to all of them. That's what's happening. I like this. It's just a little too big. They can bring it down a little bit, I'm all for it, but the way it is right now, and it's very hard, sorry Mayor, it's a very hard decision for me to make, but I'm worried about the traffic and just the size of it, coming over the bridge and seeing it. I'm sorry, I'm going to say no.
Mayor Walsenburg?
Well, there's a lot of things that I like about the project, but this thing has to go through so many boards and so many different things, and there's going to be a lot of changes to it. I actually like, before we do the second reading, is to hear some of the comments from the planning board to make a better and more understanding decision. So I have a lot of confidence in our planning board. There's a lot of good people on there. what their role, if we vote this through tonight, is to get some feedback from them before the second reading, where we could either table it or vote no on the second reading. So I'm going to vote yes to send it over to the planning board at least, because I'd like to hear their comments. So, it's yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Thank you, April, and thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council President Juan and Councilman Brennan, former Council President, for your comments. As I shared with the developer when he was up here, I have concerns about this project as well. Based on the presentation that we had 18 months ago, I received a lot of feedback from residents about this project and about their concerns. I do believe tonight that the developer brought up some points that I do not remember him bringing up last time, and seeing how this is only first reading for introduction, and the fact that our council has advised us that we shouldn't take public comment, I feel that the public should have a right to comment on this project. And, in 2 weeks, or if we need more time, 4 weeks, whatever it is, we'll have an opportunity to have a public forum where residents of Belmar can formally share their feelings and ask questions about the project. We didn't have that tonight. And if I vote no, we're not going to have an opportunity for the residents to voice their concerns, and I think the residents of Belmar deserve that. Unfortunately, I wish it could have been done tonight, because I know a lot of people are here and have concerns and want to express them. But I don't want to vote no, because I want to hear formally from the residents of this town how they feel about it. I want to read the traffic study that was referenced, and I want to see the rendering of the other building that was proposed some times ago. So I'm going to vote yes, just for first reading, to get it off the table so we can get feedback from our residents at the next meeting, and that's when we'll be making a final decision.
Okay, Councilman Carvelli?
By the way, if we do vote yes, and then we table it, we have to start over in January, correct? Yeah, but that's okay.
If you vote yes, they would move on for second reading at the December 17th, April?
21st.
21st, I'm sorry. December 21st meeting. Now, come December 21st, in the event you want to table it, the ordinance essentially is killed, and we'll have to reintroduce it on first reading in 2022.
Right.
It can't go over the
Understood.
calendar year.
So I'm going to vote yes on this end, because I do want to send it to the planning board. I want to get the feedback from the planning board. I also do want to have feedback from the public in the open session, so that we can have an open dialogue. I don't think we should kill this in its tracks at step one. There's a very long process that comes after this, and this is only the very first step that enables that process to get started. So for all of those reasons, I'm voting yes on this. Thank you.
Okay. Next is ordinance 2021-37. This is an ordinance amending chapter 3 regarding tourism fees. Do I have a motion to offer it for first reading and introduction?
Motion.
Second.
Okay. Councilman Brennan?
Yes.
Councilman Juan?
Yes.
Mayor Walsifer?
Yes.
Councilman McCracken?
Yes.
Councilman Carvelli?
Yes.
Okay, now we're on to public session. If anyone would like to come up and speak, please state your name and address first.
Mark Levis, 904 13th Ave. It just seems kind of rushed. Why were we putting this ordinance up when we knew we had to pass it, within the next council meeting? Why can't we have just waited until January to put the ordinance on, and then you have that time where you can table it for 3-4 weeks and allow the planning board to take a look at it, to review it, to have more public comment on it, to figure it out? It just seems like that would have been a smarter move versus trying to rush it in before the end of the year.
The planning board's gonna look at it on Monday.
Yes.
No, I understand that there's not a whole lot of time, like if you can't table it for 3 or 4 weeks like Councilman McCracken had suggested, it has to be done before January 1st.
That's correct, but as far as the reason why the ordinance is being adopted now, that's something that you could inquire on at second reading.
Why, it's public comment, I can ask
Public
why,
comments on-
I can ask why the room is painted the color it
You
is,
can ask
right?
public comment on anything, that's 100% correct,
Yeah.
but as far as why an ordinance is being adopted, an ordinance that is going to be heard on second hearing, you can ask your question then.
I'm just asking why it was introduced today versus introducing it in January when you'd have more time for public comment and there wasn't a huge rush to get it done. It's
really
not
a
a question
It's
I,
been going on for 2 years, so it was ready to go. We had time tonight, and we said we would hear it tonight.
okay, that's fair. My concern with this ordinance is not so much the development. I understand that that area does need to be developed. My concern is with us sort of changing our zoning laws to accommodate a single developer. Some of the points that were brought up by the developer were that the zoning area really wasn't right for that size building. But if that's the case, why aren't we looking at the entire Seaport redevelopment area? Why are we looking at just this building? If a 5-story building is what's needed, then shouldn't we be modifying the entire Seaport redevelopment plan and looking at the entire plan in its whole versus just looking at a single lot for a single developer?
Well, it's something they brought that up, but I had asked our planner to start to take a look at that.
Okay.
Because the east side of Main Street is totally different than this project here on 35.
I agree.
You know, we went through a big issue with moving that one project up and trying to keep it 50 feet from residents when they could have developed it 10 feet from the line. I don't feel that that's right, and we wouldn't let that developer move forward until he moved it 50 feet from the residential property line and move it towards Main Street. So we've asked them to really take a look at that and start to really look at the Seaport redevelopment, because on the east side of Main Street is totally different than out on 35 Highway or even down by the water. So, and it is like our planner said, it is a big area, and you brought that up, but we've already been in discussions talking with her to do that.
It'd be worth seeing that when that does come out, if there is a study and something presented, and if this is going to be revised again, that would be.
Yeah,
that'd be
so we'll take a
interesting to
look
see.
at it.
My other concern is if this developer falls through for some reason, say they're not able to get past planning board approval, well, now we've just said that that property could be 5 stories. So any
No.
developer could come in.
That's not the case, no.
Is it not? We've
Every,
changed the ordinance.
every developer would have to come in and ask for relief, everyone, is that correct?
That's correct, and they would need a development agreement with the town.
It just doesn't go with the property because we're granting it for this one. No, if he dropped out, they would have to come in with their plan and take a look at
So
it.
the Seaport redevelopment plan doesn't change if this developer decides they want to
So
move
this
on to
is
something
not like a
else?
traditional zoning ordinance. There are multiple steps in order for a developer to take before they're able to actually come to the board to fruition. So
Oh, no,
I understand what
I
you're
understand
saying,
that, but I'm saying.
and the parameters for these 3 lots, were approved on first reading. We still have to get through the planning board in second reading, but just if this developer were to go away and someone else were to come in, they're still gonna have to get an approved redevelopment agreement before they can come to the board.
I
So,
understand
yes,
that, but
they-
wouldn't this site still be zoned now for the higher story
Yes, it
building?
would. Yes, the answer is yes. And some would say that, you know what, is these 3 lots are different from, as the mayor had indicated, the east side of Main Street, different from the waterfront. I personally, if I were the professional at the time this was done, I wouldn't have done one size fits all. It's too big of an area and too diverse an area. So I do think it needs to be revised and relooked at for a variety of different things.
I agree, but
As
maybe
it-
we should do that before we try to rush this in before the end of the year. If the whole Seaport redevelopment plan needs to be revised, we should revise it accordingly, not just for a single
Quite
developer.
frankly, I don't think that's practical,
So-
because it's too big of an area. I can tell you that myself and my office have been having conversations with a multitude of people over the course of the past several years, interested in various areas in town. And so, there's a balance between doing a top-down approach
versus a bottom-up approach. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, but you can't just autocratically say, this is how it's gonna be, because if it doesn't work, it's gonna sit for 15 years like this is sat. So you have to have some interest, you have to have some, this is not a condemnation situation. You have a multitude of property owners that have to engage in the process. So it doesn't make sense to do a one-size-fits-all. I understand that, yes, it's December and it looks like it's getting towards the end of the year and things are moving, but as the mayor said, I think as the business administrator indicated, this is a conversation that's been taking place over the course of the past 3 years at least. So while it may seem rushed, because now it's formally in the public, I can assure you that it has taken a very long time to get to this point, so.
I have concerns because I don't think our Seaport redevelopment plan was just a one-size-fits-all. I think it set limits, but it set limits to what this is the max we will accept. So if another developer comes in and says, well, that 5-story building's nice, but I think a 6-story building works at my lot next to it, and it's not gonna be a problem. Are we then looking at 6 stories and where does it stop? I mean, this developer referenced the building on 10th Avenue that's new as an example for why they feel they should be able to go this big. I hate that building on 10th Avenue. It's an eyesore.
I'm not in love with it either, just so you know.
And I understand that this isn't, this is just a difference of opinions. I don't feel personal about any of this. For me, I would rather see if there's a reason to change the Seaport redevelopment plan. It's done comprehensively and holistically about the whole Seaport redevelopment area and not just changing rules and regulations for a single developer. That's my opinion.
Thanks, Mark, great comments. And I just want to clarify, I think, something Jen said, and maybe then I'll be corrected myself.
No worries.
We voted tonight to introduce this ordinance to the public.
Okay.
And the way that the municipal process works is at the second reading, the public has an opportunity to comment and give feedback on the process. And in addition, the mayor and Councilman Carvelli proposed that even a second step to send it to the planning board on Monday to get their feedback. I think if we had introduced this tonight, taken public testimony and voted on it, we could have been accused of rushing something through. Instead, I think, my opinion, what we did is right because the public wasn't able to comment tonight. So it wasn't approved, it was introduced. It was approved to be introduced tonight, and the approval would happen at the next meeting.
Correct, so it's required to be introduced. Thereafter, it's required under the redevelopment law to go to the planning board. It's not just like an offer that we think we should do this, it has to go, that's a requirement.
Okay.
And thereafter, it comes back to the council for a second reading and hearing where the members of the public can ask any and every question they could ever dream of.
Thanks for that clarification.
But I do also want to add to that is that the planning board process, there is not a public hearing at the planning board. I want to make that abundantly clear. It is a conversation between the planning board and the planning board only. There is not a public hearing there. The public hearing is before you when it comes back. When it goes to the planning board, it's for consistency with the master plan. They can offer up recommendations, but it is not a public hearing. There will be no public process associated with it at the planning board. The public process.
By the way,
Public in intent.
I'm not saying they can't hear it, but there's no public hearing where they can get up and opine. And I'm not saying they can't, there's no public process. The process is here before you after it goes to the planning board. The planning board process is for them to review for consistency, offer up recommendations back to you for you to consider during the public hearing, at which time the public offers you their opinion. There is no public hearing at the planning board.
This happened with the 5G ordinance.
All right.
Right, yeah, it got sent to the planning board, the planning board reviewed it, the planning board attorney writes a letter stating, what they found, what they decided, which got delivered to us before, before we voted.
All right, so better yet, we have opportunity here now for 2 groups to give us feedback, the public and the planning.
Correct.
And by the way, if this for some reason falls through, we can always change the Seaport redevelopment height thing back.
Absolutely, we go back to the
Later,
drawing
right?
board.
What?
We go back to the drawing board.
Right, if it falls through, we don't want to leave the height on these 3 parcels the way that it may get approved. We can always change it back later.
Correct, we could always make it.
Repeal the
amendment,
Repeal the ordinance, a new ordinance that changes it back, whatever, right?
Provided the developer hasn't already received planning board approval.
Correct, so that's what, if it falls through,
Try
that's,
and
if
do that.
it falls
Try
through,
and do that.
right.
Right, yes.
Sherry, go ahead.
Hi, Sherry Russo, 1218 Briarwood Road in Belmar. Sorry, give me 1 second. I had a lot that I had written down about, what the developer said, et cetera. I'm sure we can save that for next week. I wanted to make one comment on that. I think that sometimes it's difficult as residents when we're waiting to speak on the same day that you vote. Because for us, we're assuming that you are also researching what your answer to your vote is going to be. So let's just say councilperson A is going to work from now until the next 2 weeks, and he's going to, or she's going to talk to people and research everything and come up with an answer of their vote. I think as residents, it's a little bit frustrating that unless I called councilperson A, that they've made their decision without hearing what I have to say. Because I'm assuming that none of you are making a snap decision at the next council meeting, and that you've put some thought into it in these next 2 weeks, and that you've previously put thought into your vote. Like, I'm assuming that you all put thought into your vote. But so I just feel that it's frustrating for us that here we all want to say our piece. I love this, I hate this, this story's great, I hate the park, I love the park, we're not gonna have a pool, we are gonna have a pool. Parking in 2019 wasn't underground, in 2020 you said it was gonna be, blah, blah, blah. But you never get to hear what we have to say in these next 2 weeks, And also, it's very kind of a little short period of time that, let's pretend we all get up here in 2 weeks, that the room is equally as packed as it is today, and we all say something so wonderful, and you don't even have time to think about that and to change your vote because you're kind of on the spot. Because we're going to all speak at the next council meeting about this, and then you will have thought about it also during that time, and then we're all going to get up and say something, and then you have like a very quick amount of time, like you don't get a recess, you don't get anything, you're just voting right then. And I think that's where most of us are frustrated in this process.
Well, we could, yes.
We could, but
Councilman Carvelli, we could
yes.
certainly table it as far as not getting a recess if the board wanted a recess to deliberate on the hearing that was presented to them prior to voting on it. We certainly could take a recess before we adjourn the meeting. Second, as far as you said that they'd be on the spot and they're forced to make the determination.
They're not forced, I didn't say.
I mean, as the councilman said.
I didn't use force.
I
don't want you to
apologize.
think that,
No,
yes,
I
okay.
sincerely apologize.
Okay.
I misheard.
Yes.
So, that they're on the spot to make a decision. They're not. They could table it and then we just introduce it again on first reading and we start the process all over again. It's just, as the mayor said earlier, we had time tonight to introduce it on first reading.
Yeah,
And we have on second reading, we'll have the hearing, the presentation will be here, the board professionals will be here. I know I definitely will be here, as will my lovely friend right here. And we'll answer any questions that we possibly can.
I understand, but I just wanted to voice what I think our frustration is as residents. Like, it's the end of the year. Now if we table it, we're going into this new year. We're all talking about how we don't want to table things for the new year. And all of us sitting back here, that I'm not sure how much you can hear or not up here, are very frustrated in all of this. And that we don't get this say that we think that we deserve to have. And I think that's where things go wrong. And I think that I understand like the law, how it's supposed to go, why things are set up that way, what's available. But I think based in reality, I do think every council person plus the mayor is going to think about this for the next 2 weeks and research and do the best job that they can do. And then as residents, I'm just saying that I think we got frustrated that we didn't become a part of that research. And so my other thing I wanted to say was, these are like really nice books. These weren't free, I'm sure. And so, that also makes us feel a little like leery, like it's already in the pocket of things. I also wanted to say, I really wanted to try to stick to things that I wouldn't be talking about next week. I wrote down that it may be the biggest single development in the history of Belmar, and maybe we can wait a few months, and maybe it's possible to put it on the ballot. Do you know, perhaps, like, council here itself is almost divided in half. Do you know, I know it's impossible to divide one person in half, just like it's impossible to divide a car in half for these parking spaces. But, do you know, it is a very divided vote, and I'm sure it's, you know, difficult all around for everybody. And so I just wanted to just say that.
I just want to interject.
Sorry.
I apologize.
Yep, no problem. I'm always willing to hear.
Those papers in your hand
Yes.
are respectfully irrelevant for what the board passed. All that is what the developer is proposing if in the event the amendment is granted.
Yes.
The board is not, excuse me, the council is not granting a development. They're granting an amendment to a redevelopment plan. That's all they're doing here.
No, I understand that, but
that's the planning board's
yes, but my point
jurisdiction.
is when you come in with these big, flashy, expensive books, it kind of looks like, as people are chatting about way in the back, oh my God, it's already in the pocket. Why do they spend so much? And look at these, they think they have it, don't they? And so, not my opinion, I just want to, you know, I think it's odd that, like, you know, they're talking about stories and I counted them with my finger, like.
So do you understand that we all take an oath?
Oh, I do.
Okay.
Oh, I don't think that you did anything shady at all.
Well, I just want to make
I
sure
don't think
you
that
and
you
the public
did at all.
understand, okay?
Yes.
That we take our role very seriously here.
I don't
And we
think,
have
no,
to-
that's not what I'm saying. I think you're
Well,
misunderstanding
I
me.
do, maybe I am, and I
Okay.
don't really like what I'm hearing, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I can assure you that that flashy book that you have is the sole discretion of that developer, and I
Yes.
personally could care less.
I know that, right,
Maybe
How
we
much
should
he
have a
spends.
copy of it.
Right, no, I agree with that. I'm
So
saying,
if he wants to spend his money to make a proposal,
Right.
no way that changes my opinion on whether or not that's something
Yes.
that I would make a recommendation for. That's on him. If he wants to
Yes.
spend his money, that's on
Right.
him. But no differently
I
than
don't
if someone
think-
came
right.
in with their proposal on a ripped off piece of paper.
Right.
It's like I think what Jerry's trying to say is that, you know, we all have a license to maintain an ethical obligation.
absolutely.
And we're gonna take our job seriously, whether they
Yep.
come in with 700 people and a flashy presentation, or one person with a broken briefcase and a ripped off piece of paper. So do not read anything into what was handed out. That's on them. If they want to spend their
Yes,
money, that's fine.
that's what I'm saying.
There's no obligation on behalf of the governing body to approve anything because they choose to spend money on presentation material.
By the way, I mean, you hear the conversation that's going on up here, and you see
Yes,
that there's
I agree with you.
dissension,
Yep.
so how could you say it's in the bag? It's already predetermined.
I'm telling you, this is what people are saying.
Right, but doesn't that seem
All right.
not...
Weird?
Thank you, we get your point. We get
Thank
your
you.
point, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Gail Ham, 707 10th Avenue, Belmar. And I understand that this is, first of all, I want to thank everybody here because I know you spent a lot of time, a lot of effort on it. And I have a respectfully asked question that's a little bit confusing to me because it seems like the vote was based on information provided tonight, and everybody kept saying 60 feet, 60 feet, 60 feet. So I did look at this, and I'm confused because I see several renderings here where it's 75 or 77 or 68. And then people, other people who are not architects and all, who are just regular residents like myself, found this to be confusing. So what is this with the rendering 75 and 68 and 77 feet?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you because I haven't seen that document,
Okay.
all right? But I can tell you for sure that as it gets through the process and it gets to the planning board, they have to provide all the information that you have in your hand, and if it's over 60 feet, they're not going to get approved.
But it is saying that right now.
It could be, I don't know. We're not voting on that. What we're voting on.
I understand that. I understand we're not voting to accept this development. I understand this is the first reading. But the first reading was based on everybody here talking about 60 feet, when what they presented clearly states 77, 78.
Okay,
So
so.
maybe I'm misunderstanding it as the non-architect, you know,
Yes.
but,
I don't
If we
but
just-
I agree
I
with-
want to bring up the question.
I agree
because
with
other
your
people-
confusion, because I don't understand it either.
Thank you. Yeah, because other people, I'm sure, are feeling the same way, you know.
Well, again, that entire piece of paper packet in your hand, you could go home and throw it out.
So
It's
there's
irre-
other information then, other than
As
this,
far-
that you guys are basing your decision on?
No, our decision is based off of the amended, well, I shouldn't say our decision, the council's decision
Yeah.
is based off of the planner's advice, the engineer's advice, as well as the amended redevelopment plan, which is attached to the ordinance as Schedule A. And it's the council's obligation at this stage to vote either affirmatively or negatively to introduce that ordinance so that it can have an opportunity to be heard at public hearing and go to the planning board to determine whether or not the amendments that are proposed therein are consistent with the master plan. Now, what this amendment does is it just changes the bulk standards for, and eliminates a few of the uses. That's it. As far as any elevation, any setback, anything that's in that is irrelevant to what the council had to make his decision on. But all
So
that
what's the
development.
planning board going to state if
So
not their?
The ordinance.
They're only
The
going at
ordinance
60
is not
feet.
going to have the same numbers as on here.
Correct.
That's not,
Right?
So, okay, so just a quick second on how you measure heights of buildings. And every town's different. And for us, it's very confusing because from town to town, they all do it different.
Right.
Center of the road, the curb in front of the building, average of the corners, everybody does it different. In this case, and I haven't seen that document, so I don't know. No, it's okay. I'd rather not.
She'd rather
No,
not.
I'd rather not. So what I will tell you is, 60 feet is for the bulk of the building. Okay? So it's gonna come up off the ground. In this case, they said they're gonna step back from 10th Avenue and from 8th Avenue a number of feet, just go 4 stories, I don't know, 48 feet high. Come in, and then they're gonna go another 12 feet for the bulk of the building, 60 feet high. The ordinance, and every ordinance does this, allows for you to now put architectural improvements into your design. So it's not a big box. None of us want a bunch of big boxes. That's where you're getting confused with those numbers. Because some ordinances say it's to the ridge line you measure. Some say it's to the middle of the slope from the eave to the ridge. Every ordinance is different. We have to look at ours in Belmar. So if you see 70 feet, it could be because the building is 60 feet.
It is.
But the architectural improvements that go with the building, they're allowed to go above that 60 feet
Right.
to make it look nice.
So
To-
the
to-
height would
to
still
hide-
be over 60 feet.
In some places, yeah, parts of that building, and you can see how it changes all through the
Yeah,
design.
yeah, okay.
But they agreed to push it and crunch it into the middle of the building and not even on the edges of the building, where it's gonna make the building seem taller. And that's the nuance, that's architecture, that's development,
Okay.
that's what they all do.
Yeah, it doesn't look like that.
And it is
Right,
confusing,
but
for
yeah.
no
Yeah,
question.
Okay, all right. Secondly, I would just like to second what the gentleman there said before, that this, we understand that this has all been looked at before, but it's Christmas. The planning board meeting is gonna be in 2 weeks, the week of
The
Christmas.
planning board meeting is Monday.
Right, I mean, our next meeting for will be, when you're opening it to the public, will be week of Christmas, which is not exactly the easiest time for a lot of people to make time to come to a 3 or 4 hour meeting. That's how I also feel, that we're not giving people enough opportunity to really, enough residents, enough opportunity to really speak their mind on what they think about it. Thank you for your time.
Any of these ordinances, that, it doesn't matter the time of the year. We do the same, the ordinance is the same every time. We introduce it, 2 weeks later, we
Right,
pass it.
but you of course know that Christmas time is one of the worst times for anybody to have any extra time to spend 3 hours or more at a planning board meeting when they have kids and school and jobs and everything else. To be able to come and say, let's go spend 3 hours talking to them, listening to the council board. You know that that is a difficult time for people. Thank you for your time.
I'm Maria Rondinaro, 1246 Pine Tree Way. I have a question. Is there an option for the mayor and council to offer public comment at any point after a workshop? You know what I mean.
No, I genuinely, as far as,
I mean, listen, I'd love to be watching Bachelorette right now with my husband, but I'm here because this is my town and I care about it. And I think that we should have been heard. And you all had that opportunity to allow the people who were here to speak before you voted on this.
well, we're missing the point, because what the workshop was on the developer's proposed construction. Now, the developer here is not represented by council. So if you're gonna inquire as to what his workshop discussion was of what he envisions this proposed redevelopment plan would be in the event he was provided the redevelopment agreement, without him, A, being represented by council, and B, not being before the planning board, where this board has zero jurisdiction to address any of those concerns or inquire as to the bulk requirements or why there are certain setbacks or architectural renderings are set a certain way, would severely prejudice the potential future applicant. And at the same time, the law is clear. First reading is introductory purposes only, second reading is public hearing. So,
I hear you, but you know, someone had mentioned, and maybe it was Jennifer had mentioned, this being not traditional. And being in the holiday spirit, this is certainly not traditional. Something of this magnitude should not be brought to our attention right before the holidays, during the holidays, right after an election. I mean, people are crunched. It looks like you've already made your decisions. And I really hope that you listen to the residents in these next 2 weeks. Call them, listen to them, even if they're the ones that disagree with you, please listen to us. Because this affects us. It affects me walking across the street to access the parks that we were supposed to have a Parks and Recs program for. This affects our community. I moved here for this small field community. Well, I could have chosen another town if I wanted to be another town. I could have chosen Asbury Park if I wanted to be Asbury. I chose Belmar. And I happen to think that a 3-bedroom apartment that might include children is a good thing because our school needs children in order to get funding from the government. Thank you.
Sandy Caputo, Surf Avenue. First of all, I want to thank Sherry, where are you, for her comment. That was excellent. That in these couple weeks, you're going to make decisions before you hear from the public. So I've never understood that. I've seen it happen before, and it doesn't seem right. This project is so big, it's so dramatic, it's so different, that there's no turning back from it, I think. If you do this, that's the future of Belmar, and projects like this. And if that's what it's going to be, I'm also concerned for Ocean Avenue. And I know you're thinking, well, that won't happen. I think it might, because there are some pieces on Ocean that this could happen to. So it's the future of Belmar that this will affect. Thank you.
I just want to say the public does have an opportunity to comment, and by law, the council is required to permit public comment at the second hearing. So they can't make a decision without that portion of the application process or the ordinance process.
Thank you. Hi, Katrina Collapses B Street. I may be the only person in this room that will stand up and say, I really don't think this project is that bad of an idea. And I think it's been going on for 2 years already. There's already been meetings about it. There will be more meetings about it. It's not a done deal. It may not be as big as what we're looking at. It may. There's a lot that goes into it, and I think it's unfortunate that people were commenting tonight, keep commenting about how we, the residents, do not want this. And I'm just here to tell you that I trust in your judgment. I think you all live here too. I think you're not trying to do anything to screw the town of Belmar or the residents. And I believe that you're trying as hard as you can. As far as being able to speak, there will be ample time for everyone to be able to voice their opinion. And I personally, not that you shouldn't take what I say into consideration, but I voted for you people and you are on the council, and big bucks, I don't think, but that's why you're up there. We have voted you into there to make these decisions for us. Not to disregard opinions, to listen to them, but you still have the responsibility to make up your own minds, but you are following the legal process that is in place. It's been going on already for 2 years, and I would like to thank you instead of yelling at you and demeaning you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, I think, very nice and honest comment. I just wanted to say that, you know, it's great to hear so much public comment. I understand that a lot of the comment that's been made is certainly of, you know, questions and concerns. What I would ask the governing body to consider, and really all members of the public, to suggest that zoning should not be revisited makes absolutely no sense. We all know that changes happen over time, and nothing is all good, nothing is all bad, but the job of the governing body is to weigh changes in our community, understanding what changes are in the best interest of the community and what aren't, and to make a thoughtful and objective decision. I know that most people are approaching this matter that way, but to hear comments suggesting that zoning shouldn't change or the project is too big, it would be great if in the next hearing, if we get that opportunity, and then the public, as they should absolutely have an opportunity to comment openly and say whatever they have to say, positively or negatively. What comes out of that discussion is, why is what's being considered by the governing body bad? Why is an extra floor on the building affecting Belmar in a negative way? Objectively and thoughtfully, because we have not heard much substantive comment about why the height, if it isn't the height amendment, if it isn't approved, why it should be approved, and what are the positives and the negatives of this decision. I think it would be very difficult to argue that there are negatives, and that and to the extent that there are, that they outweigh the positives. Right? No redevelopment.
All this is going to be addressed at the second
That's
hearing,
fine.
so there's no reason to go into this room.
Okay, the last thing that I'll say is, I would encourage all members of the public that wish to comment and the governing body, read the redevelopment plan. You can't just make a decision about one aspect of the redevelopment plan with respect to a bulk standard height without understanding the context.
And we got it.
We got it.
Like, we got it over here. Like, I think
That's
that we got the ability to advise them. We understand your position. You presented your position. I don't think they need to understand their role. They got it.
Okay, I understand. I was more directed for.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. And the
Thank you.
last. Can I make one last comment?
Thank you. Being honest, it's my job.
700 Main Street, Joe McAvoy. I just want to reply to what he said, okay? We understand it's flexible, the heights of the buildings. We understand, you know, changes could come to the master plan. We get that. But every time a resident posed a question to this mayor and the council in the past about zoning and development, the answer's always been, that's up to the planning board, or we have a master plan that we follow for residential development that the town's adopted. Now all of a sudden it's different. I think that's what worries a lot of people. Like Councilman Brennan said, we could get on a slippery slope. Mark Levis asked the question directly to you. He said, once we approve this to 5 stories, can we go back? And you said yes. You said no.
No, yes, they can. I think maybe there was a misunderstanding there. If we approve it to go up, and excuse me.
I said, if we approve it, it only is a no on this specific piece of property if in the event, say, we're gonna go with just, it's been here before the board, that this developer gets approved, gets the development application, the developer agreement for this.
Right, I understand.
Partial, and then they go to the
But initially-
and then they go to the planning board, and they get this fully approved, and then after it's fully approved, the borough goes,
But
nope,
initially,
you're
they
not allowed
get
to
two
do
different
that.
answers.
Correct, because it's two different answers, is the correct answer. Yes, if there's been no action taken where it could be perceived as a taking from the developer. Now, we don't want to get into any condemnation issues. So if he has the full legal authority to build there, and he's in the process of building it, and then we change our mind and say, no, you can't do that, he may assert that what we've performed is a partial taking. We're not going to get into that. So in the event, the way procedurally, say it gets passed on second reading, and then January, I think our regular meeting is January 3rd, if I recall? 4th. So say January 4th comes, and after the holiday break, council here goes, nope, you definitely shouldn't have done that, and we get instructed to prepare a new ordinance, essentially rejecting the previously adopted one before any additional actions were taken. We can go back in time.
But you said the calendar year zeroes it out anyway, didn't you?
An ordinance cannot start in 2021 and finish in 2022. You can't do that.
Right.
And also, the makeup of this governing body is changing come reorganization,
So
right?
after January 1st, it all starts over.
If they don't finish by the end of the year.
Right.
So it's not like, so you're asking multiple questions, and you're
No,
asserting that there's a
I'm listening to what
one-size-fits-all.
he's telling me, and
Yeah.
it contradicts what he said.
He's not.
We're both in
Okay.
complete
All
agreement,
right,
because there's
fine.
multiple
I
different
trust you.
answers.
Now, I'm gonna say, I was set against it originally. It was a great presentation, and I really like it. I like it as a centerpiece for the town, for the marina area, everything about it. But, Long Branch is a city, we're a town, and they first opened up with the comparison of Long Branch and the buildings in Long Branch. There used to be a Jersey Shore style of architecture for years. That was indigenous to this region. That's a bad word, indigenous, but, towards this region. You understand where I'm going?
Yes, I do.
Now everything looks the same.
All these considerations are going to be here
All
for
right.
second here,
Okay.
reading, I should say.
All right. But, they don't know our town. He even said, 9th Street. There's no 9th Street in town, it's 9th Avenue. They don't know this town. Come on, really. I catch everything.
From Philly,
I hear
with 9th
this
Street and
stuff.
2
I'm a good-
Street.
Yeah, I'm a good listener. But it's a great building, but where does it get us? Does it get us, some other direction? Now, the last question I have for you, Mayor, is on Belmar.com, on the website, the area that was proposed, that was outlined, also had Belmar Mall and the train station and Hook Cafe. Now, can you explain if that is also going to 5 stories? Because it's not.
Just this piece of property.
So that was
1, 2, and
incorrect
3, right, Jen?
on the Belmar.com website. So
That
that's
is
no good.
incorrect. So it's just these 3
All right.
lots between 35 and the train station. It
Understood.
doesn't extend beyond that.
Okay, because on the Belmar.com website.
No, I saw, yes, but that's,
Okay.
yes.
So we can get that on the record too.
That is on the record.
All right, absolutely. Can I address Councilman McCracken about the flags?
Certainly.
Okay. Councilman McCracken, I appreciate your help on it, I really do. Councilwoman Juan, I appreciate you letting me speak freely at the last meeting. You could tell I was a little angry, I still am. Because the following day, it wasn't corrected. It wasn't corrected immediately. Now, your father-in-law served in the Marine Corps in combat in Vietnam. November 10th was the Marine Corps birthday. All right, the flags were still up in the dark. And when I walked home from Salty's, I took the flags down. Because I'd let you know, this is it. The flags either come down at sunset and go up at 08 until you can get lights on them. So don't tell me that it was corrected the next day. It wasn't. It's corrected 2 days later on Veterans Day. I took the flags down, I folded them up, I brought them to the police station. I walked in, and I told the dispatcher, I said, the mayor's gonna speak at Veterans Day tomorrow. these flags need to go up by 0.8, no problem. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know if I worked for the town, if I was with the VFW, donating the flags, if I was a flag company dropping off new flags. I took them down in the dark, all right? If you can't be the proprietor of the flags, we will be, all right? Marines show up.
Joe, can I make a suggestion though?
Yes, sir.
I mean, the minute that you see it, and you know, I'm in full agreement with you, those flags should have been lit. I didn't notice it, I guess the guys from DPW didn't notice that the light was out.
Just drive around town once in a while. And look, walk, take your bike.
I know, but
Federal
can you
property,
notify
your
us?
post office, Mayor,
Can
your
you
post office.
notify us right away? Because we would work on it right away and make sure that it gets done. So.
I just mentioned the borough property, federal property, the post office. There's no lights on that flag either. Now, as a mayor, driving down Main Street, maybe you can call the post office, because it's not my job.
Yeah, we will.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Kramer.
Gene Creamer, Fourth Avenue. I think everybody can hear me.
I need it for the internet.
Am I good?
Internet, yeah.
Just give me the mic.
I wanted to comment that I think that DPW did a great job all around town with the Main Street lights. I think it looks tremendous. And also down by the Husserman gazebo down there by Silver Lake. That looks very nice at night. Actually, I have old business here. This goes back to the meeting on October 19th. And actually, I just have a question. This was resolution 2021-219. And it was approved by council. Resolution authorizing issuance of a plenary retail consumption alcoholic beverage license with broad package privilege. And that was for Flames. I was unaware, and maybe this is a change of operation. Has Flames always operated with broad package privilege?
I think that's what the license is, it's broad C. They can, I guess, sell packaged goods out of there, they don't, but I guess it's the type of license that it is. So I think, and I'm sure the attorney can answer this better than I can, but some of the liquor licenses have that ability for selling packaged goods if they wanted to out of their establishment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's multiple different options, but big two main options are the Broad City, or in the event that there's another one whose initial I'm blanking on right now, it's just a straight up liquor sales only establishment.
So, yeah, so he has the ability to do that, he don't do it, but it's the type of license that it is.
Yeah, I guess, well, number one, the reason I didn't catch it when, I came to the meeting and grabbed a copy of the resolution at the front was because the public notice made no mention, the notice that was published in the newspaper, made no mention of this broad package of privilege. I guess my question is more of, is this a proposed change of operation for the operator?
No, I think it's just a renewal of license, but.
Okay, I understand that, but in other words, this operation has always had a license that gave broad package privilege?
Mayor, you want me to? So previously they had a seasonal license. They purchased a year-round license that had the Broad Sea package, and that was transferred to them. And then this year they renewed it. The reason there was a notice in the paper was because of the pandemic, the state was behind on processing the original license previously owned by someone else, and then they were behind on approving the transfer, so this license got delayed on renewal, which is why they had to put a notice in the paper and why we didn't do it until October. But it was previously transferred in 2019 or 2020. The license was, they obtained that license. They usually, before that, they had a seasonal license.
Okay, now, they operate a sidewalk cafe. They have a sidewalk cafe permit. Was that sidewalk cafe permit issued for also the operation of selling packaged goods? This sounds to me like this is a change of operation here. In other words, now you can be able to go inside and buy a bottle of booze and walk out, whereas perhaps before you were only able to sit down and be served a retail consumption.
I just believe it's the type of license that it is. How it got advertised, I don't know, but it's not a change of use. It's just the type of license it is, that somebody can come in and buy a six-pack or whatever from the bar, and he has that availability to do that. I don't think they do, but I think it's just, it was advertised as the type of license as a renewal, so, and I don't know what was advertised in the paper, but it's just, I think it's just the type of license, am I correct, Patrick?
You're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, was the sidewalk cafe permit that they were issued by the borough to occupy the public right-of-way, was that issued when they had a seasonal license, or was that issued when they now have a retail consumption license with broad package privilege?
So if I may, I don't really know the full footprint of Flames because I don't have the drawings, I don't have any of the renderings, but say their license would extend into their sidewalk cafe if it is a part of that single tax lot and it's a part of their singular unit operating as a restaurant. Now, if it's two separate establishments and they have the sidewalk cafe under Joe Schmo ownership and then they have Flames under Jake Schmo ownership, and Flames has the Broad Sea license, then the sidewalk establishment wouldn't. But if it's all the exact same ownership and it's all the exact same establishment, then there's no issue there. They would be able to sell liquor on their sidewalk in addition to their inside the actual restaurant themselves.
Is that a change of current operation, though?
No, it's not.
It's not?
No.
In other words, they can come out on the sidewalk and sell perhaps a fifth of scotch, cash on the barrelhead,
Well,
in the public right-of-way.
That's a little more nuanced, a little more different in that factual circumstance. What I'm talking about is, say they have a two-top or two-person table sitting on the sidewalk, and you're there and you say, you know what, I want to have a Johnny Walker on the rocks. That waiter can serve you there. However, when you're inside and you go to like the bar or you're being served by your waiter and you say, hey, can I have a six-pack of beer to go home with, they would be able to pack you up a six-pack and give it to you at your table for you to leave. But it's not something as far as like a walking liquor store where you can walk around and you find a waiter just standing there and say, hey, can you give me a pint of Crown Royal? That's not how it works. As far as whether or not they're allowed to sell packaged liquor as opposed to beer or wine, it really depends on the full outline of their liquor license. I would have to review it and see exactly what they own.
Because the action that the borough took with this resolution included the entire premises.
That's correct.
Okay, so they could sell fifths of scotch from tables out on the sidewalk.
The answer to that is going to be depends, because it depends on whether or not their liquor license permits them to sell. There's liquor and then there's beer. So you have some liquor licenses.
Yeah, but this says broad.
I understand. I don't have the full outline of exactly what the Broad Sea is. I'm working off memory, and you're testing as much as I can remember off of the Broad Sea license.
It appears to me that this is a change of operation. To the best of my knowledge, they've never sold liquor other than if you were going to consume it.
Patrick, can you research that and give?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're asking questions, and let's look at the Flames, the license, and look at the Broad Sea, and then he can give you, because we're all trying to think from memory, and to give you the exact answers that you need. I think Patrick has to research a little bit for us.
Well, yeah, Mayor, I guess the point I'm trying to make here is the activity that's actually taking place within the public right-of-way. I think we all would admit that's much too congested there. The public can't pass there. And by the way, I did take a closer look. It appears that one of those steel poles that's in the way of walking along the sidewalk there is actually owned by the borough. All the other utility poles in Monmouth County with your traffic and Verizon and Cablevision and Jersey Central Power and Light Company, all those poles are identified. But there's two poles, one on each corner of 10th and Main, one on the west side and one on the east side. I was just looking at the borough, the calendar that we had purchased for next year from the Historical Society. Those poles may very well be from when the borough had a trolley line. They're two old steel poles. They've been there for as long as I've been in Belmar. But we may actually have a historic landmark there right in front of Flames. But I think what I want to get to is the sidewalk cafe permit that was issued to Flames to operate there. Now, if there's a proposed change in the operation, that negates, that makes that sidewalk cafe permit, it's just not applicable.
I'll have Patrick research it. We'll take a look.
And the other thing is, you know, the town fathers, when they did draft up that sidewalk cafe permit, the conditions are that, number one, you can't change the operation for what it's been approved for. And then the other one is that it has to comply with all the relevant zoning regulations. And I do not know how, and this, by the way, is not in a redevelopment area. This is a good old Belmar zoning. This is commercial business district number 1, where there is a requirement for a site triangle. And I don't know how you can comply with it. I don't think that property is even eligible for a sidewalk cafe permit. Okay, enough on Flames. But actually, I have another question. The planner mentioned there's no condemnation in the redevelopment area in Belmar. And I believe that's correct, right? What's the difference between condemnation and eminent domain?
Nothing.
Oh, so we all can understand now that the town can exercise eminent domain over in the residential district where the first aid squad is located, but it can't exercise eminent domain in the redevelopment area. Why is that?
I have no idea.
Just the way the legislature crafted the law.
I mean, you can't just use eminent domain just 'cause. I mean, there has to be a public purpose. But, you know, the law allows municipalities to exercise their rights. You know, the redevelopment law has changed over time to require a declaration of whether or not it's in need of redevelopment condemnation or in need of redevelopment non-condemnation. But the governing body still has the ability outside of that legislative arm to exercise eminent domain for a public purpose. For example, another community that I work in Northern Monmouth County, utilized eminent domain to take a piece of property for an affordable housing project. So affordable housing has been declared a public purpose. So they do have that right. They can't just decide, I don't like you, so I'm gonna take your property because I want it. Like, there has to be a public purpose associated with it.
And they could even, the borough could even do that within the redevelopment area.
From what I understand, it's a non-condemnation designation, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they cannot, because the law, the redevelopment housing law states that you have to declare whether you're gonna use condemnation or you're not when the area was designated. And once it's designated under one of those two prongs, that's the path you take. So it's my understanding, and that's the feedback that I've gotten, correct?
That's correct.
That it's a non-condemnation area, meaning they don't have the authority or to use eminent domain in the redevelopment area.
Okay, so if the Belmar First Aid Squad was located in the redevelopment area, the borough could not exercise eminent domain.
Not as far as I know.
Okay, thank you. It just that it seems as a landowner, you have more protections in the redevelopment area than you do in the residential district.
I have no opinion of that. I have no comment to that.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer.
All right, anyone else? All right, I know it's been a long meeting. Thank you, everyone, for coming out.
Can I have a motion to close the public session and adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.